Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Donald Harvey. Donald Harvey was born on April 15, 1952, in Hamilton, Ohio, to Ray and Goldie Donald. He was the oldest of 3 children and was affectionately known as Donnie by his parents. Following his birth, the family relocated to Boonville, Kentucky, a small community in the Appalachian Mountains. Despite struggling with poverty, they was loving and nurturing to their children. However, their marriage began to deteriorate due to their economic struggles. As a child, Donald was quiet and mostly kept to himself, showing no apparent signs of abnormality. However, he suffered a traumatic past, being sexually abused and assaulted by at least 3 men. The perpetrators included his uncle on his mother's side, who molested him during visits to his grandmother's home, and an older neighbor who offered him money for sexual favors. Additionally, at the age of 18, Donald claimed to have been sexually assaulted by his roommate, Randy White. While a traumatic past can contribute to the development of psychological issues, Donald was often perceived as a loner in school. He preferred to focus on his studies and rarely participated in extracurricular activities, opting to read instead. Although this helped him earn good grades, it also led to teasing and the label of teacher's pet. After graduating from Sturgeon Elementary School, Donald enrolled in Boonville High School in 1968. Despite his good academic record, he soon found himself bored with the daily routine and decided to drop out. However, he eventually earned his diploma through a correspondence school in Chicago and received his general education development at the age of 16. With no clear future plans, Donald struggled to figure out his life's direction. He eventually moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he landed a job at a local factory. However, when the factory closed down in 1970, Donald lost his job and was left uncertain about his future. Around that time, his mother called and asked him to visit his ailing grandfather, who was in Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. Donald agreed to the visit. During his daily visits to see his ailing grandfather, Donald formed strong relationships with the hospital workers, who grew to genuinely like him. Their admiration for him led to an unexpected job offer. Although it is unclear what motivated Donald to want to work as a nurse's aide, some speculate that he needed to earn a living after losing his previous job. Despite lacking formal training in nursing or medicine, the hospital staff entrusted him with responsibilities. Donald's job at the hospital involved caring for patients on his own, including tasks like changing bedpans, inserting catheters, and giving medications. Despite the challenges, Donald's early weeks at the hospital passed without incident. However, on the evening of May 31, 1970, Donald was attending to 88-year-old stroke patient Logan Evans in a private room. Suddenly, Evans rubbed his own feces on Donald's face. While it's likely Evans wasn't fully aware of his actions due to the effects of his stroke, the incident triggered something within Donald, leading him to completely lose control. Without realizing what he was doing, Donald suffocated Evans with a blue plastic bag and a pillow until the patient was motionless. He then checked Evans' pulse with a stethoscope to confirm his death. Following the killing, Donald disposed of the plastic bag, cleaned Evans' body, dressed him in a fresh gown, and showered him before notifying the nurses about the patient's passing. After the first incident, no one suspected anything out of the ordinary. Donald went to cover the patient with a sheet, but instead, he used his hand to smother him to death. It was surprising that he was able to do this without anyone noticing, especially since he used a pillow to kill him. The next day, Donald was assigned to care for another elderly patient, 69-year-old James Tyree. He made a critical mistake by using the wrong size catheter on him. When James realized what was happening, he yelled at Donald to remove it. Donald used his hand to restrain him, which caused him to vomit blood and eventually die from an air embolism. Once again, no one suspected foul play. With no one suspecting him of any wrongdoing after his first 2 murders, he became more confident and careless. Just 3 weeks after the first murder, Donald deliberately cut off the oxygen tank of 42-year-old patient Elizabeth Wyatt. He later claimed that he had ended her suffering, as she had expressed a desire to die. A nurse found Elizabeth dead 4 hours later, but no one questioned Donald about her death. Over the next 10 months, he took advantage of the lack of suspicion and killed 15 more patients under his care. He saw this as an opportunity to indulge his darker impulses, and he continued to kill without being detected. Donald's methods of murder varied widely, driven by a desire for pleasure or experimentation. He would often use smothering, sabotage oxygen tanks, inject lethal drugs, or overdose patients with medication. When angered, his methods became even more brutal. On one occasion, he inserted a coat hanger through a patient's catheter after an argument, puncturing the patient's bladder and bowel, which led to infection and death a few days later. Despite the brutality of his actions, Donald considered himself a mercy killer, the self-proclaimed angel of death who was playing God with vulnerable patients. He cloaked his horrific deeds in a mask of kindness, believing that his actions were somehow merciful. On March 31, 1971, the day he was arrested for burglary while drunk, Donald's life took a turn. In his incoherent confession, he revealed his dark secret to the police, but no one took him seriously. As a result, he faced only charges of petty theft and paid a fine instead of serving prison time. This close call prompted Donald to attempt to turn his life around. For a few months, he tried to regain stability and eventually landed a part-time job as a nurse's aide at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington. In June 1973, Donald started a second nursing job at Good Samaritan Hospital in Lexington. He held both nursing positions simultaneously before eventually moving on. Between August 1974 and September 1975, he took on 2 non-nursing roles, a telephone operator in Lexington and a clerk at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. Notably, Donald was able to resist his urge to kill during this period. A possible explanation is that he had limited access to patients in these new roles, which may have also contributed to his decision to change jobs frequently. Donald's struggle to control his killing urges eventually became too much to manage, leading him to relocate to Cincinnati, Ohio in September 1975. He found employment at the Cincinnati VA Medical Hospital, working various roles including nursing assistant, housekeeping aide, and autopsy assistant. The hospital's night shift schedule and lack of supervision gave him unrestricted access to all areas of the hospital. Over the next decade, Donald murdered at least 15 patients while working at the hospital. He meticulously documented each crime in a diary, detailing the methods he used to kill his victims. These methods included poisoning patients' food and drinks, suffocating them with plastic bags and towels, and injecting them with lethal substances. Donald's experimentation with different methods was influenced by his study of medical journals, which he used to refine his techniques and avoid detection. Donald preferred cyanide as his method of murder, which he mixed into patients' food or administered through their gastric tubes. He accumulated a large stash of cyanide, approximately 30 pounds, which he stole from the hospital over time and kept at home for safekeeping. He stated that he began using morphine to kill patients in the 1970s, particularly in small hospitals in Kentucky where it was not heavily regulated. He also mentioned he used other methods, such as cyanide, arsenic, adhesive cleaner, and suffocation with a plastic bag. Despite the numerous deaths, he claimed to have avoided suspicion by making them appear accidental or due to natural causes. He revealed that in reality, he was a serial killer hiding in plain sight, preying on vulnerable patients. He took it upon himself to decide who lived or died, often without the patients' or their families' consent. He justified his actions as merciful, but he acknowledged that the truth was more complex. While he claimed that his crimes were motivated by compassion, other evidence suggested otherwise. He recounted that a turning point came in the early 1980s when his behavior became more erratic and driven by rage. He started dating a man named Doug Hill, but their relationship was tumultuous. After a heated argument, he poisoned Doug's ice cream with arsenic, and fortunately, Doug survived. This incident marked the first time he tried to harm someone outside of the hospital, revealing a darker side to his nature. Donald's behavior took a dark turn after a fight with Carl Heller. He moved in with Carl Heller, but the relationship quickly became toxic. Donald's jealousy and paranoia led him to suspect Heller of cheating, and he started lacing Carl's food with arsenic to keep her from leaving. As time passed, Donald's cruel actions extended beyond his home. He poisoned a female neighbor's drink with hepatitis serum during an argument, and she almost died before receiving treatment. Unfortunately, another neighbor, Helen Metzger, was not as fortunate. Donald poisoned one of her pies with arsenic, which ultimately led to her death. Donald's lack of consequences for his crimes emboldened him, and he became more confident and reckless. He felt like he was above the law, having gotten away with multiple murders. In April 1983, Donald's behavior escalated. After a disagreement with Heller's parents, he began secretly poisoning their food with small doses of arsenic. The following month, Carl's father, Henry, suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. During a visit, Donald saw an opportunity to strike again and laced Henry's pudding with arsenic. Henry died that night. Over the next year, Donald continued to target Carl's mother, Margaret, periodically poisoning her in an attempt to kill her. In January 1984, Donald's relationship with his partner, Carl, ended, and he was asked to leave their home. Donald reacted poorly to the breakup and spent the next 2 years trying to harm Carl using poison. He also attempted to kill one of Carl's female friends in a separate incident, but was unsuccessful. Although Donald did manage to hospitalize Carl at one point, his attempts to kill her ultimately failed. Donald's behavior raised suspicions on July 18, 1985, when security guards at his workplace discovered a suspicious collection of items in his gym bag. The contents included a gun, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors, gloves, a cocaine spoon, medical texts, occult books, and a biography of serial killer Charles Sawbridge. As a result of the discovery, Donald was fined $50 for carrying a firearm on federal property and given the option to resign from his job quietly. Surprisingly, the incident was not documented in his work record, and the hospital did not investigate Donald for potential involvement in other crimes during his employment. He was able to secure a new job as a part-time nurse's aide at Drake Memorial Hospital in Cincinnati just 7 months later, in February 1986. Donald Harvey's new employers were impressed by his work and soon offered him a full-time position at the hospital. Unbeknownst to them, Donald had a dark past, and he quickly fell back into his old routine. Over the next 13 months, he murdered 26 more patients and attempted to kill several others by tampering with their life support machines, injecting them with lethal substances, and suffocating them. The murder spree finally came to an end on March 7, 1987, with the death of 44-year-old John Powell. Powell had been recovering from a motorcycle accident, but his sudden and mysterious death raised suspicions. Due to Ohio's law requiring an autopsy in cases of vehicular homicide, the authorities were able to investigate Powell's death. During the autopsy, the assistant coroner detected a faint scent of almonds, a sign of cyanide poisoning. This discovery led the authorities to launch an investigation into Powell's death. Initially, they suspected Powell's friends and family, but they found no evidence or motive. The focus then shifted to hospital employees who had access to Powell's room, and Donald Harvey was one of the individuals they needed to rule out. Hospital employees were voluntarily taking polygraph tests to clear their names. Donald Harvey also was offered to take a test, but he didn't follow through. Instead, he called in sick on the day of his scheduled test. He had even purchased a book on how to cheat on lie detector tests. This raised suspicions, especially when investigators discovered his notorious nickname, Angel of Death, and learned about his questionable partner from the hospital. As the investigation continued, authorities focused on Donald due to the unusual number of deaths surrounding him. During questioning, Donald initially denied any involvement in John Powell's murder, claiming he was just a victim of circumstance. However, after hours of interrogation, he eventually confessed to putting cyanide in Powell's feeding tube. He claimed he did it out of sympathy for Powell and his family, but denied responsibility for the other suspicious deaths. Donald was taken into custody, and investigators began searching for more evidence. On August 11, 1987, Donald, then 35, confessed to committing 33 murders over the past 17 years. As the investigation continued, the number of murders he confessed to grew to 70. Donald's claims of multiple murders raised suspicions among investigators, who questioned the accuracy of the numbers he provided. To verify his credibility, they ordered a series of psychiatric evaluations by multiple experts. The tests concluded that Donald was sane and competent, able to distinguish right from wrong and conform to the law. In 1987, Donald was sentenced to 8 life terms plus 20 years for the murders committed at Mary's Mount Hospital. The following year, he pleaded guilty to 3 additional murders and 3 attempted murders in Cincinnati, receiving 3 life sentences and 3 terms of 7 to 25 years. After a 2-year investigation, the remaining cases were closed due to insufficient evidence linking Donald to the crimes. The public was both shocked by Donald's actions, and many wondered what drove him to commit such heinous crimes. In a 1991 interview with the Columbus Dispatch, Donald revealed that his motivation stemmed from a desire for control. He felt that others had controlled him for 18 years, and he sought to reclaim power over his own life. Donald admitted that he enjoyed the sense of power that came with deciding who lived or died. Donald Harvey is one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history, not only due to the high number of victims, but also because he targeted people he knew personally, including his patients. An Associated Press article from 2001 listed him as the worst serial killer in the United States. Contrary to expectations that Donald would spend the rest of his life in prison and die of natural causes, his life took a different turn. On March 28, 2017, Donald was found severely beaten in his cell at the Toledo Correctional Institution, where he was being held in protective custody. He died 2 days later from severe head injuries. Months later, an inmate named James Elliott confessed to the crime in a letter to the Toledo Blade. James, who was serving a 37-year sentence for multiple burglaries, claimed that he had committed the murder to bring closure to the families of Donald's victims, who were from his hometown in Kentucky. In his letter, James wrote that he hoped his actions would bring some solace to the victims' families, as Donald had not received the punishment he deserved from the courts. In September 2019, James was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to the murder of the notorious Angel of Death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tess Ritchie. Tess Ritchie was the youngest of 5 sisters, born on November 30, 1994. She spent her childhood in North Bay before moving to Toronto at the age of 19. According to her sister Verena, Tess loved her life, dogs, and family. She worked as a waitress in Toronto, but her dream job was to become a flight attendant and travel the world. Although Tess struggled to find a job she liked, her family was always willing to support her financially. Some sources suggest that after failing to find work at an airline or hotel, she began learning Italian and searching for job opportunities in Italy online. Tess also created content on YouTube, with her last video uploaded on February 23, 2014, nearly 4 years before the events we will discuss. In that video, Tess shared her personal experiences and the challenges she faced. Tess explained that she searched everywhere for someone who would understand and relate to what she was experiencing, but she never found that. She said her boyfriend's physical abuse is never acceptable, no matter how minor it may seem. She stated that he hit her, and even downplaying it as just throwing a purse at her is embarrassing because it happened in his bedroom, and it's a sad reality. After recording this video, Tess mentioned that she faced more personal struggles. In 2017, she experienced a devastating breakup with her boyfriend Julian on November 23rd. The next day, she turned to her older sister Rachel, who was not only 8 years older, but also her closest confidant. Tess recounted that she spent most of November 24th at Rachel's house in Toronto, where they discussed her breakup, went shopping, and visited a dog park. Rachel had to encourage her to eat dinner because she had lost her appetite due to stress. Despite her emotional state, Tess made plans to meet an old school friend, Riley Samar, that night. Samar was from North Bay, and she had moved to Toronto in the summer of 2017. They hadn't seen each other in years, but now that they were both living in the same city, they had started talking again. Samar suggested they go to Cruise and Tango, a well-known drag bar in the Church in Wellesley area, that evening. Rachel's partner arranged for Richie to take an Uber to meet Samar downtown. Richie saw her sister Tess running out to catch the Uber, which was the last time she would ever see her alive. Richie arrived at the Cruise and Tango club around midnight, but Samar wasn't there yet. The club was packed, and Tess sent a text to her sister to let her know she had arrived safely. The next morning, Richie sent a text to her sister, not expecting a quick response since Tess had been out late the night before. However, by 6:30 p.m., Richie still hadn't heard back from Tess. She then discovered that none of her texts had been delivered to Tess's phone. When Richie tried calling, the calls went straight to voicemail. Their mother, Christine Hermiston, also attempted to contact Tess, but her phone was turned off. Christine got a notification that her daughter Tess had ordered an Uber at 4:02 a.m., but then the ride was canceled. This happened because Tess had used Christine's credit card to set up her Uber account, so Christine received updates on all of Tess's Uber rides. When Christine and her family couldn't reach Tess during the day and her phone stayed off, they started to worry because Tess always kept in touch with them. Rachel typically kept her phone with her at all times. On Saturday night around 9 p.m., she asked her partner to check on her sister's apartment in Scarborough while she reached out to her friends. Tess was still missing, and her family was growing increasingly worried. Rachel began calling hospitals and also contacted the police. By the following evening, the police had no updates for Tess's family. Multiple officers were assigned to search for Tess Richie, but no one had seen or heard from her in the past 2 days. On Monday, Tess's mother, Christine, and one of her sisters traveled from North Bay to Toronto to help with the search. They distributed flyers featuring Tess's picture, hoping someone might recognize her. The family did everything they could, but unfortunately, the police's investigation into Tess's disappearance was lacking. Meanwhile, Tess's friend Riley, who had gone to the bar with her that night, returned home safely. When asked about Tess's whereabouts, Riley mentioned that they had both been drinking heavily, which led to the bar's security asking them to leave. They left the bar shortly after 2 a.m. and headed to Wellesley Street to grab a bite to eat. On their way, they met a guy who decided to join them, but Riley couldn't remember his name. Once on Wellesley Street, they ordered hot dogs. Tess asked for a vegetarian hot dog, which led to a disagreement with the vendor. Tess thought she received a meat hot dog, and Riley noted that Tess accidentally sprayed mustard all over the vendor's cart. After that, Tess, Riley, and their new companion ran to Dundonald Street. There, they encountered a woman named Michelle on her porch and struck up a conversation that lasted about 20 minutes. Tess confided in Michelle about her recent breakup and how difficult it had been for her. Michelle offered her support, and they even exchanged phone numbers. Michelle observed that Richie seemed to be trying to enjoy himself, But when she looked into his eyes, she noticed a deep sadness. The breakup with Julian seemed to be affecting Riley heavily. Riley reassured her that things would improve and encouraged her to stay strong. At 4 a.m., Riley got a text from her boyfriend asking her to come home. She said goodbye to Tess and headed towards Yang Street before going home. Tess felt let down that Riley had left so early. At 4:02 a.m., she ordered an Uber, suggesting that she decided to go home too after Riley left. The Uber driver arrived at 4:14 a.m., but Tess was not there. On Wednesday, November 29th, just a day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine began handing out flyers with her daughter's picture in the area where Tess was last seen. Since Riley had separated from Tess on Dundonald Street, Christine decided to investigate that area. She reached out to Anne Brazo, a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, knowing their daughters had been friends since elementary school in North Bay. Together, they began searching for Richie as efforts intensified and social media campaigns aimed to find her. During this time, Brazo made a chilling discovery while looking into the bottom of an outdoor stairwell at a construction site located at 582 Church Street. She immediately recognized Richie's body lying on the concrete. "I was in complete shock, horror, disbelief. I couldn't understand what I was seeing," said Anne, fighting back tears. Feeling frightened, she noticed dust from a nearby gravel pile settled on Richie's body. Brazo let go of the staircase railing and stepped back down the gravel driveway toward Church Street. Meanwhile, Hermiston was further up the sidewalk, unaware that her daughter's body was so near. Brazo called out to her, "Christine, come back here. There's a girl in the stairwell. You need to come back." Hermiston turned and ran down the driveway, stopping suddenly at the stairwell. After a few moments, she began to scream, pleading with God for assistance. Tessa's death presented a heartbreaking event for her entire family. They discovered her body only 300 yards from the bar where she had been before disappearing, and just 20 yards from the last place her friend Riley saw her. This situation raised many questions about the police's response, especially since her body had been found just a couple of blocks from the bar. After Anne and Christine located Tessa's body, an anonymous police source shared new information with the media. It was reported that Tessa had advertised her intimate services online and had worked at a strip club. Tessa's mother stated that the Toronto police did not adequately search for Richie because they assumed she was an escort. This assumption was horrifying to Hermiston, who expressed her anger at the media's portrayal. After Richie's body was found, police sources claimed she was involved in the sex trade, which Hermiston called a blatant lie. They spread this information to suggest she led a high-risk lifestyle, deflecting blame from themselves. Although Tess briefly worked as a waitress at a strip club, she quit less than 2 weeks after starting. The mention of intimate services was linked to a dating site account, not a profession. Despite the discovery of Richie's body, the circumstances of her death remained unclear. Initially, police did not suspect foul play, but the homicide unit took over when an autopsy indicated she had died from neck compression. Additionally, they discovered seminal fluid on her clothing and saliva on her bra. DNA tests revealed male DNA, prompting police to begin searching for a suspect. Based on Riley's testimony, detectives aimed to identify the man Tess had met that night, as he was the person she spent time with after Riley went home. The police examined CCTV footage to gather information about that night. The video shows Tess and Riley leaving the bar and heading towards a hot dog vendor. There were also cameras on the building near where Anne discovered the body. After reviewing the recordings, the police observed Tess and an unidentified man walking hand in hand up the gravel driveway. According to the police, the camera captured Tess and this unknown man at 4:14 a.m. A subsequent recording taken 46 minutes later showed the man leaving the location alone, with no further footage of Tess. This led the police to consider him the main suspect in the Tess Richie case. On December 10th, during a press conference, The Toronto police released images of him obtained from the surveillance footage. They hoped that someone would be able to identify him. The police discovered the identity of the man after seeing the published images. He called the police station himself and stated that he was the guy in the photo. The person who was with Tess that night was identified as 21-year-old Colin Schlatter. In the fall of 2017, Schlatter was 21 years old and living with his parents and younger brother in their home in North Toronto. He had completed a year of postgraduate studies to become a car mechanic and was working with his father in construction. Schlatter, along with his parents and one of his lawyers, visited the police station where he spoke briefly with detectives but chose not to testify. But finally, they provided the police with important evidence. While still at the police station, Schlatter discarded an empty water bottle in a trash can. The police took the bottle and sent it for forensic analysis. After some time, they found that the DNA on the bottle matched DNA samples taken from seminal fluid and saliva found on Tess Ritchie's body, indicating that they came from the same person. Police planned an undercover operation to observe Schlatter for several weeks, but the DNA results sped up their timeline. Schlatter was arrested at approximately 11 p.m. on February 4, 2018, after watching the Super Bowl with his family at a cinema. He was taken to the 13th Division and placed in a holding cell at 3:19 a.m. on February 5th. Two other men were in holding cells next to him, both of whom were undercover police officers. Schlatter was unaware that he was about to provide them with a significant amount of evidence. The three men were in plain holding cells, each containing a combination toilet, sink, and bed. In the cell, Schlatter discussed his love for card games and claimed he had a knack for attracting women. He bragged about having slept with over 40 women, even though he was only 21. Schlatter did not encounter Tess and her friend Riley on the street. He saw them for the first time in the same bar where he was present. This recording was made just before security asked Tess and Riley to leave the bar. Schlatter also spoke to undercover officers about Tess. Initially, he claimed she was alive when he departed. However, he later suggested that something might have happened because alcohol had clouded his memory. He doubted his own capability. The police charged Ken Schlatter with the murder of Tess Ritchie, but he denied the accusation. In June 2018, police officers Alan McCullough and Michael Jones were charged with 2 counts of misconduct for neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. The report of hearing stated that they allegedly failed to thoroughly search the nearby property or immediate area, interview neighbors, and inform a supervisor. If they had followed protocol, Christine Hermiston stated, they would have found her. She was lying just around the corner. During the 2020 trial of Ken Schlatter, his defense argued that someone else could have approached the stairs where Tess was lying by climbing over the fence on the other side of the building, thus avoiding the cameras. The lawyers even named another suspect, but the police thoroughly investigated and interrogated this person, finding no evidence linking him to Tess's death. DNA evidence pointed to only one person, Ken Schlatter. Schlatter, a slight man who appeared soft-spoken in court, explained that he has a speech defect, causing him to slur his words and stutter sometimes. He claimed that Tess offered him a place to hide from prying eyes at 4:02 a.m., which explained the presence of his DNA on her belongings. Tess Ritchie had ordered an Uber, but when the driver arrived at the pickup point at 4:14 a.m., she wasn't there. Instead, Calvin Schlatter approached her again. They sat down on a bench at the corner of street. Schlatter stated that Tess seemed upset after their argument, so he went over to check on her. Schlatter claimed Tess asked him to sit and talk, but with no audio on security videos, it can't be confirmed. He said she was upset about her breakup, so he shared a similar experience to comfort her. Schlatter claimed that later, Tess asked if it was okay to kiss him. He said they stood up, hugged, and kissed each other. However, there is no footage of this kiss on the available CCTV footage. Schlatter claims that Tess Ritchie asked him to accompany her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and then down the outdoor stairwell. However, the prosecution questioned his motives, as an Uber driver was waiting for Tess at the time. It is unclear what Schlatter said to Tess to persuade her to walk with him into the darkness at 4 a.m. According to Schlatter, they kissed for a long time, and he ejaculated in his pants. He wanted to take things further, but Tess refused. Schlatter states that after this, he invited Tess to his house, but she declined and told him to leave. He claims that he left, and Tess was alive when he departed. There were only 2 people who knew the truth about the events of that night. Unfortunately, one of them had already passed away. During the trial, the prosecution presented 2 key witnesses, Riley, a friend of Tess, and Michelle Tepp, a woman who had spoken with Tess and Schlatter that night. Both Riley and Michelle identified Schlatter. In addition to talking to 2 undercover police officers, Schlatter is also alleged to have shared important details with a cellmate, known only as ES due to a publication ban, when they were both being held at a Toronto detention center for about 2 months in 2018. ES has a long history of criminal activity, including multiple break-ins and a domestic assault. The informant, who shared a cell with Calvin Schlatter, initially felt sympathetic towards Schlatter because he was a young man experiencing imprisonment for the first time. However, as time passed, his opinion of Schlatter changed. Schlatter would often cry himself to sleep, claiming he didn't want to serve his sentence and missing his mother. Despite this, Schlatter showed no regret when discussing the death of Tess Ritchie. According to him, Schlatter admitted to kissing Ritchie and losing control when she refused to go further, ultimately strangling her with a scarf. In court, Schlatter denied having these conversations with the informant, and his lawyer portrayed the informant as a deceitful liar. Nevertheless, physical evidence suggests that Ritchie was strangled, and only Schlatter's DNA was found on her clothing. In her final statement to the jury, defense attorney Lydia Riva presented her client, Schlatter, as a harmless and innocent young man. She acknowledged that it can be difficult to accept, but the criminal justice system is not infallible and can sometimes make mistakes. On March 23, 2020, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced Schlatter to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The trial was emotionally devastating for Ritchie's family and supporters, who were often left reeling and in tears in the courtroom. Tess's death has left the family feeling guilty and broken, struggling to look at each other. They're seeking $20 million in damages, including punitive damages, to ensure justice for their daughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alicia Canales McGuire. Alicia was born on October 29, 1992, in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales. Her passion was helping others, which led her to work as a caregiver for most of her adult life. Growing up on a farm, Alicia learned the value of hard work from a young age. Starting to work at just 5 years old, she often returned to the family farm to lend a hand. Spending time with her family was crucial to Alicia, and she made it a point to regularly visit and call them, always remembering to express her love when saying goodbye. Alicia lived in Birdsview with her husband Bradle. Alicia lived in the house her sister Amanda's home, where Amanda lived with her 3 children. When Amanda had to travel to New York for work, she asked Alicia to watch her kids during her absence. Alicia was happy to help care for her nephew and nieces. One night, a nanny staying in the house with her called 911 after waking up to the sound of gunshots. When the nanny went downstairs, she found Alicia lying motionless at the front door. The police officers who arrived at the scene first secured the house to ensure the perpetrator was not still inside. They carefully checked every room, confirming that only the nanny and the children were present. Once the children were safely removed from the house, the police began searching for evidence. A car was parked in front of the house, with shell casings nearby, indicating that the shooter had stood next to the car right before the front door. Several bullets had hit the door frame, and Alicia's body was lying face down just outside the door. The police found no signs of a robbery, as the house was not in disarray, and it appeared that the perpetrator had not entered the house at all. The detectives were left wondering who would want to kill Alicia and why. When they discovered that the crime scene was her sister's house, they considered the possibility of mistaken identity. Maybe Amanda, Alicia's sister, was the intended target, but she was safely in New York at the time. The investigators turned to the nanny, who was also in the house during the shooting, for answers. After calming down, she was able to provide some information. She told them that she was upstairs when she heard the gunshots, and when she looked down, she saw Alicia lying face down on the floor, motionless. Unfortunately, she didn't see the shooter. She mentioned that Amanda, Alicia's sister, had issues with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. Upon reviewing reports from the local sheriff's office, the detectives discovered that this was not the first call to the address, with all previous incidents related to domestic disputes between Amanda and Kevin Lewis. The detectives focus on this particular testimony. They located Kevin Lewis's home address in another part of Everett and paid him a visit before dawn. His house was dark, and when they knocked on the door, Kevin answered. During their conversation, the officers asked if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied that she should be at home. Appearing disheveled, as if he had just woken up, the detectives asked Kevin to account for his whereabouts the previous night. He claimed to have stayed at home and stated that his sister and mother could vouch for his alibi. Notably, he didn't ask why the detectives were visiting him. When detectives told Kevin that a shooting had occurred at the house where his children lived, he showed no emotional response, which was unusual. As a parent, he should have asked about his children's well-being, but he remained silent. However, when they informed him that Amanda was out of town on business, he expressed surprise, saying "really," and the conversation ended there. The detectives decided to investigate further by reviewing footage from surveillance cameras at neighboring houses. They wanted to verify Kevin's alibi that he had stayed home all night. They saw a car stopped near Kevin's driveway about 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. A person resembling Kevin then exited the house, got into the car, and drove away a few moments later. Although the footage was not clear enough to confirm it was definitely Kevin, the detectives continued to review additional camera footage. They took a closer look at the car, but that didn't help identify it. All they could determine was that it was a light-colored vehicle. They fast-forwarded the recording and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. This time, they noticed a crucial detail. The front right rim was different from the others. While the three other rims were light in color, the front right one was dark. The car stopped near Kevin Lewis's house, and the same person who had gotten out of the car earlier got out again and went back inside. Whoever this person was, they entered the house about 20 minutes before the 911 calls about a shooting started coming in. After that, the car left and didn't come back. Since it was a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's house, it's possible that the car had enough time to get to Amanda's place. However, it was too early to say whether this car was involved in the shooting at all. Amanda found out about her sister's death a few hours later, when their father called her in New York to break the news. When investigators asked Amanda, a key witness, if she thought her ex-husband Kevin was responsible for Alicia's murder, she was adamant that he was the one. Although Amanda's 8-year marriage to Kevin Lewis ended, she struggled to acknowledge the toxic nature of their relationship. Despite their divorce in June 2017, Amanda lived in fear of Kevin, who had physically abused her in the past, leaving her with bruises. After their separation, Kevin continued to threaten her. In August 2017, Amanda was granted full custody of their 3 young children, and Kevin was ordered to provide $800 in monthly support instead of child support. This marked a fresh start for Amanda, who focused on rebuilding her life in Everett, Washington, and was grateful for the support of her family as a single mother. Kevin, a former military man, threatened to kill Amanda, and she took him seriously due to his training. Believing she was the target, Amanda obtained a restraining order against Kevin, but he violated it multiple times. He would often lurk around her house, peeking through the windows, which terrified not only Amanda, but also her 3 children. Despite the violations, Kevin was never charged by the police. Weeks before her sister's tragic death, Amanda was brutally beaten in her own driveway. She was getting out of her car late one night when someone launched a surprise attack. Although the assault happened quickly and she didn't see the attacker's face, Amanda was convinced that Kevin was behind it. Investigators believe 30-year-old Kevin Lewis is the prime suspect in the murder of Alicia. They think he intended to kill his ex-wife, but he was unaware that she was in New York at the time. Unbeknownst to him, Amanda had asked Alicia to babysit her children while she was away. However, there's a problem with this theory. If Kevin was the person in the footage, it would mean he was at his home during the shooting. Moreover, his sister and mother have provided him with a solid alibi. As a result, the police have continued their investigation, exploring alternative explanations for the crime. They returned to Amanda's house to re-examine the crime scene and track the path of the bullets. The investigation revealed that Alicia was shot when the door was only partially open. The shooter fired at least 7 shots from outside the house, which entered the interior. The evidence suggests that the shooter stood next to the garage and fired, then moved towards the door and fired again from inside. The medical examiner determined that Alicia died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso, with 5 shots hitting her. 2 of the wounds showed signs of gunpowder residue, indicating close-range shots. While the examiner couldn't determine the exact order of the 5 shots, they believe the last 2 head wounds were likely the final 2 inflicted. Furthermore, experts concluded that the 7 shell casings found at the scene came from the same gun. Alicia's head wounds were caused by close-range bullet shots. The investigators explored the possibility of a personal motive behind her murder, but found no evidence to support this theory. The shell casings discovered at the crime scene were a rare Russian-made brand called Tull ammo, which gave the police hope of tracing the seller and buyer. The police learned that Walmart had sold the 9mm Tull ammo cartridges and had CCTV footage of the purchase. Upon reviewing the footage recorded 2 days before Alicia's death, they initially suspected Kevin Lewis as the buyer. However, the footage revealed a different person who paid using a credit card. The police identified this individual, but found no connection to Kevin Lewis, Alicia, or the nanny. The investigation thus required new leads and evidence. Amanda was questioned by investigators about her relationship with Kevin. She revealed that their relationship started well, but Kevin eventually became aggressive and violent, leading to their divorce, a restraining order, and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. Despite this, Amanda believed that she was the intended target of the shooting that killed Alicia, not Alicia herself. She suspected that Lewis had orchestrated the attack, but investigators knew that Kevin was at home at the time of the shooting. Upon re-examining the footage from the night of Alicia's death, investigators noticed something they had previously overlooked. The low-quality recording showed Kevin leaving his house and getting into the back seat of a car behind the driver. This raised questions, as most people would typically sit in the front passenger seat. The likely explanation was that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat, meaning there were probably 2 people in the car by the time it arrived at Kevin's house. This new evidence didn't directly link Kevin to Alicia's death, but it did contribute to the growing case against him for attacking his ex-wife Amanda. In November 2018, Kevin was arrested and later sentenced to 3 years in prison. Over a year had passed since Alicia's tragic death, yet her case remained a mystery. However, a breakthrough finally came in 2019 when the police station received a crucial call from a woman with vital information. The caller claimed to have met a girl named Angelica at a party in nearby Spokane, who boasted about being hired to commit a murder on York Road, the same road where Alicia was fatally shot. Although the police were initially skeptical, given the significant distance of 5 hours between Spokane and Everett. According to the caller, Angelica had proudly shared details about how she and her boyfriend were involved in the crime. Alexis Hale, alias Angelica, claimed a woman was fatally shot in the head, saying the killer was hired by the children's father and mistakenly targeted the wrong person. Police were interested in her detailed knowledge of the case. They discovered her true identity, found social media photos of her with a 9mm pistol, and videos featuring her boyfriend, Jadon Phelps. A video posted by Alexis on the night of the murder helped investigators pinpoint her location, about 10 minutes from Kevin Lewis's house. Jadon boasted about a large sum of money on social media, leading police to discover his connection to Kevin through his aunt. With this evidence, they made an arrest. The first person to be taken into custody was Alexis Hale, who protested loudly, claiming she was only 17 and couldn't be arrested. However, she knew why she was being arrested and demanded a lawyer. Police arrested Jadon Phelps, analyzing his and Hale's phone records, showing they drove from Spokane to Everett to commit the shooting. Security footage from Lewis's neighbors revealed someone in a white top leaving and returning around the time of the crime. Lewis was wearing a white top when questioned. Phelps, in custody, revealed Kevin Lewis hired him and Hale and led police through the crime scene, pointing out the door and corner. He stood where he was positioned during the crime, reenacting the events, and admitted to shooting at the door when it opened slightly, then firing 2 more shots before fleeing. Kevin Lewis was already in jail for a crime when he was arrested and charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder in connection with the September 2017 death of Alicia. In July 2020, 20-year-old Phelps pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. His co-defendant, 18-year-old Hale, also pleaded guilty to the same charge and received a 15-year sentence. During the trial, Phelps testified that he committed the crime for financial gain and to increase his reputation on the streets. He used the money Lewis paid him to get tattoos, purchase a pair of Timberland boots, and buy a Ferragamo belt buckle. Phelps claimed that his former girlfriend had obtained the gun used in the crime from a family member, and he had given her $200. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced trial. Prosecutors alleged he paid $2,400 to his cousin and girlfriend to kill his ex-wife, but they mistakenly targeted Alicia. Lewis directed them to the address, claiming he didn't know the target. Phelps and Hale exited their vehicle, with Phelps stopping near the garage and Hale knocking on the door. As Alicia opened it, Phelps fired multiple shots, eventually walking up to the porch, and they fled. They returned, fearing they left a glove, but saw police and drove away. Finally, Judge Thompson also ordered Lewis to no longer have any contact with his ex-wife, his children, and Phelps and Hale for the rest of his life. Records indicate that he remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick, also known as Matt Pat, was born on June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Pat. During his high school years, Matthew was an active member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his time in the Navy, he landed a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, Matthew struggled to get along with his co-workers. According to his sister, Chrissy Duca, some colleagues were jealous of his uncle's influence and resented the fact that Matthew was being groomed to take over the business. As an outdoorsy person, Matthew enjoyed activities like boating, camping, and hunting in his free time. He also participated in softball and hockey games. In 2003, Matthew met his partner, Holly McFeature, and they started dating soon after. They moved in together in a Cleveland home and began building a life. Friends described Matthew as a happy and settled person who was eager to start a family. Within a year, they welcomed their daughter, Samantha, and 2 years later, their son, Josh. Additionally, Holly's child from a previous relationship also became part of their family. Matthew fell deeply in love with Holly, and his mother, Patricia, said he loved her with all his heart. In a short time, Matthew went from being a bachelor to a father of 3. The early years of their relationship were filled with love, passion, and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their relationship had become argumentative and strained. Whenever Matthew and Holly had a fight, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's house. This happened multiple times, and his friends advised him to end the relationship, suspecting that Holly was selfish and had a bad influence on him. Despite their warnings, Matthew never listened and always went back to Holly. Matthew had a life insurance policy that listed Holly as the beneficiary, but his friends cautioned him to remove her from the list. Again, Matthew ignored their advice. Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, recalled a tumultuous period in Matthew's life. During this time, Matthew's mood would swing wildly, veering from extreme happiness to anger, crying, and fear. Russell understood that Matthew was struggling with depression. Despite being initially thrilled about the prospect of raising his 3 children, Matthew's outlook was overshadowed by the volatile situation at home. Russell urged Matthew to take precautions and remove guns from the house. Later, in 2006, after the hockey season ended, Matthew began gambling online and lost a significant amount of money. His family and friends grew concerned about his well-being and noticed his depression. At their suggestion, Matthew sought medical attention and was prescribed antidepressants. However, by the spring of 2006, Matthew's health began to decline rapidly, prompting Russell to express grave concern about his physical well-being by Memorial Day weekend. Russell had asked Matthew to help him move a motor from one boat to another. However, Matthew, who was once very strong, had since gained weight and was struggling with the task. He was sweating heavily, complaining of back pain, and claimed to have lost his strength. Concerned, Russell advised Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, Matthew phoned Russell to ask for directions to Dr. Mandat's office. During their conversation, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to remember where the doctor's office was. The doctor's appointment revealed that Matthew's primary complaint was back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help him pass the stones and manage the associated pain. A few days later, on July 30th, Matthew called his father to share that he had bought a fishing rod for his daughter and invited him and Russell to go fishing together soon. Matthew's father said his son was looking forward to a meeting, but later that evening, Matthew attended a party with Russell Henry, who testified that Matthew was in bad physical shape. He had gained weight, was sweating heavily, and had trouble walking due to extreme back pain. After the party, Holly contacted Matthew's father, telling him she had called 911 because something was wrong with his son. The father briefly spoke to Matthew over the phone and found him confused and upset. An ambulance took Matthew to Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he had metabolic acidosis, a condition in which the blood becomes too acidic. Dr. Mandat, part of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance like methanol or antifreeze. Holly denied that Matthew had swallowed anything harmful. Tragically, Matthew died the next day, July 31, 2006, due to kidney failure. Dr. Mandat explained that metabolic acidosis is usually caused by respiratory problems, but not in this case. He added that ethylene glycol, a toxic substance found in antifreeze, can also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's family and friends were devastated by his death, but Holly showed no emotional response. In fact, her friend Rebecca Vega was surprised by Holly's lack of emotions when they made funeral arrangements together. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to enter the room where the casket was, and she seemed unbothered. Russell Henry described her as acting like nothing had happened, almost as if she was at a party. What's more, Holly's actions soon after Matthew's death raised suspicions. The day after his death, she used his bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, emptying his bank account. Her mom reported this activity to the police, leading to Holly's arrest and charges of forgery. Holly agreed to repay the money and was placed on probation for a year. Her family claimed she was trying to get money to care for their children, but it's worth noting that Holly was also a beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although it was a small amount of $10,000. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Rebecca Vega visited Holly and was concerned to see cleaning solvents lying around the kitchen, given the young age of the children in the home. Holly was questioned about Matthew's death. She mentioned that one of the items found was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, testified that Matthew hadn't had a working boat since 2004 or 2005 when the engine failed. Michael Jama, a Cleveland police officer, had been friends with Holly since 2002. He would often visit her home, where she would babysit his children, and they would chat over coffee. To avoid interrupting her or any other man, he would call ahead. One day, when he called, Holly told him he didn't need to worry about calling ahead anymore because Matthew had passed away the previous week. Holly discussed Matthew's death in a surprisingly casual tone, mentioning that he had kidney problems and pain from playing hockey. Her casual demeanor came across as insensitive and heartless, Michael recalled. After Matthew's death, Holly removed all of his belongings from the house. She gave his computer to a friend to delete certain content, and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt, leaving his father and brother with no mementos of him. 6 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly began a romantic relationship with Charles Lipham, a police officer from Cleveland. Initially, she told Charles that her ex-boyfriend Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story. When the autopsy results were released in January 2007, they revealed that Matthew's body contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, a key ingredient in antifreeze. After learning this, Holly speculated to Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken the substance to end his own life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether his death was intentional or accidental. Holly gave conflicting accounts of Matthew's death to different people, claiming she didn't know what antifreeze was and telling one friend that Matthew died in an industrial accident. She also suggested that a colleague might have poisoned him out of envy. However, Matthew's family suspected that the killer might be someone close to home, citing Holly's apparent lack of emotion at the funeral, despite claiming to have cried in the car beforehand. During their investigation, detectives found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's home, which was documented in the police report. Holly later started dating Jameson Kennedy, a man with a criminal history and substance abuse issues, but she kept the details of Matthew's death secret from him. One night in September 2008, Holly became emotional while drinking with Jameson and began talking about Matthew, revealing previously undisclosed information. Holly broke down in tears and expressed her desire to escape her problems and leave Cleveland. She revealed her regret over a past event. When Jameson asked what was bothering her, Holly made a shocking confession. She had spiked Matthew's drinks, which eventually led to his death over time. However, Jameson wasn't convinced of her sincerity. He sought the counsel of his lawyer friend, Santiago Feliciano, and shared Holly's admission with him. Santiago advised Jameson to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then contacted Holly to discuss her confession, unaware to her that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would reiterate her claim about causing Matthew's death, but instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming him. Holly denied putting anything in Matthew's drink, saying she never mentioned such a thing to Jameson. However, their relationship began to deteriorate as Jameson suspected she had cheated on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to Holly's house to confront her. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When they arrived, Jameson attacked them and was arrested for assault. He was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After his arrest, Jameson told the police that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death. This new information led the police to reopen the case, which had stalled since the 2007 autopsy report. The investigation was reinvigorated as more evidence pointed to Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. Dr. Galita conducted the autopsy on Matthew Pat's body. 6 months after the autopsy, Dr. Galita issued a report detailing his findings, which was co-signed by then-County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balge. The report concluded that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the manner of death remained unknown. Dr. Galita explained that the ingested ethylene glycol entered Matthew's bloodstream and then his liver, where it was rapidly broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase. This process transformed the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. Notably, Matthew's kidneys contained an extremely large amount of these crystals. Dr. Galita's testimony revealed that Matthew's flank pain, which started on May 20, 2006, was caused by kidney crystals. During the examination, Dr. Galita found not only kidney damage, but also signs of the kidneys trying to heal. Further examination showed that Matthew had crystals in his heart and brain. Dr. Galita also diagnosed severe acute myocarditis, a heart muscle inflammation that takes at least 3 weeks to develop. Dr. Galita concluded that Matthew's death was a result of prolonged ethylene glycol intoxication, which led to a series of acute events and sublethal poisonings over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends confirmed that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would bring to work in a thermos or the original container, often a half or whole gallon jug. One friend, Michael, recalled that Holly McPhee would occasionally bring lunch to Matthew, which always included a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. During their investigation, police seized 2 bottles of antifreeze, one Peak brand, one Saturn brand, from Holly's garage in August 2007, after she had moved out. 3 years after the initial autopsy results, the report was revised in 2010. The updated report, signed by Dr. Frank Miller, the county coroner, concluded that Matthew Pat's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning and was a homicide. Although the cause of death remained the same, the revised report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, authorities finally decided to take action, charging Holly McPhee in July 2012 with aggravated deprivation of Matthew Pat's life. In 2013, Holly pleaded not guilty and faced trial. The prosecution's case relied on circumstantial evidence and featured 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, his doctor, and police officers who investigated the case. During the trial, witnesses testified about Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting his doctor, and the fact that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004, eliminating any need for antifreeze. Meanwhile, Holly's lawyers argued that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her guilt and pressured law enforcement to pursue charges against her. Holly's legal team claimed that she was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew was struggling with depression due to his online gambling losses, work issues, and difficulties communicating with his young child, which led him to intentionally ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense claimed Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze, not multiple doses over time. They presented Dr. Robert Bucks, who testified that Matthew's death was due to acute poisoning, indicating a single ingestion of ethylene glycol consistent with suicide. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's myocarditis diagnosis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He added that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning, and flank pain isn't a typical symptom. Dr. Bucks claimed kidney stones aren't related to ethylene glycol poisoning, but the state presented contradictory evidence. Matthew struggled with depression, but was committed to being a good father. Jamison Kennedy testified that Holly confessed to mixing something into Matthew's drinks, but Holly denied it. Kennedy's credibility was questionable, but Sergeant Quinn confirmed Kennedy's statement was made when Matthew's cause of death was unknown. The jury delivered a guilty verdict on August 28, 2013, sentencing Holly to life in prison with parole possible after 30 years. The case relied on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. Hello, friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda grew up to be an aspiring writer with a passion for words, music, and life. She graduated with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009 and worked at Trinity Mother Frances while attending Tyler Junior College, where she majored in English literature. On September 15, 2010, 15-year-old Nate Anderson found his sister Amanda dead on the floor with multiple bullet holes in her head after returning from a jog. He had gone out to clear his head while doing homework, but became stressed and returned to find the door kicked open. Nate immediately called 911, describing the scene without touching anything. When investigators arrived, Nate recounted the events, still shaken. The investigation revealed that Amanda was shot while sitting on her bed, causing her to fall to the floor. The killer removed shell casings, suggesting a revolver was used. Amanda's death was devastating to her parents, who were deeply religious and couldn't comprehend who would commit such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was trying to find her way in life. She had no enemies and wished no one harm. The investigators canvassed the neighborhood where the crime took place, speaking with residents to gather information about Amanda and her family. Uniformly, the people they interviewed described the Andersons as a tight-knit, religious family. One neighbor offered a possible theory about Amanda's fate. He pointed out that the area was previously crime-free, but 2 weeks before Amanda's death, a house in the neighborhood was robbed. It's possible that the same person was involved in Amanda's murder. The neighbors suggested that the perpetrator might have seen Amanda's brother, Nate, go for a run, then broken into their house. If Amanda witnessed the break-in, the robber might have shot her to silence her. To explore this theory, the investigators needed evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. Typically, burglars who are caught by homeowners will go to great lengths to prevent them from calling the police. However, in this case, nothing was taken from the Anderson home, and Amanda's room was left undisturbed. Amanda's home was burgled, but the thief didn't take anything valuable, including jewelry and a laptop. Amanda's father, Mark, checked the house and confirmed that nothing was missing. This led the investigators to question whether the break-in was actually a robbery gone wrong. The forensic team searched Amanda's room and the entire house for evidence, collecting fingerprints and hair samples that didn't belong to Amanda or her family. They also took the clothes Nate wore when he found Amanda's body, even though they didn't have any visible bloodstains. This was consistent with Nate's 911 call, in which he said he hadn't touched anything. The police still sent the clothes to the lab for further analysis, along with other evidence. To begin their investigation, the police first had to rule out Amanda's family members as potential suspects. They asked her father, Mark Anderson, to show them all the weapons in their house, which was a common practice in Texas. Although the Andersons weren't avid hunters, they did occasionally practice shooting. Following Mark's directions, the police found and seized over 10 different types of pistols, rifles, and revolvers from the house. With no clear motives or suspects, the police explored the possibility of criminal gang involvement, but they quickly dismissed it. Their informants also didn't provide any useful information. 2 days after her death, on September 17, 2010, the police received the autopsy report, which revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times in the head. What was especially puzzling was that every shot would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator had continued to pull the trigger 3 more times. The unusual location and direction of the bullet wounds on Amanda's head raised suspicions. The attacker used a small-caliber pistol, firing from a distance of at least a yard away, as there were no gunpowder marks around the wounds. 2 wounds were located on top of her head, one near the right temple and one on her forehead, with all shots entering from top to bottom, except for one shot to the right temple that entered at a right angle. This suggested a deliberate and controlled attack, more like an execution. Forensic analysis led investigators to believe that Amanda knew her killer. They based this conclusion on 2 key facts. Firstly, Amanda was sitting on her bed, occupied with her laptop, when she was shot, indicating that she felt comfortable and safe in the presence of the attacker. Secondly, the fact that the attacker was standing next to her suggests a level of familiarity and intimacy. If Amanda had not known the person, she would likely have reacted or taken action when they entered her room. But she did not, implying that she trusted the perpetrator and did not anticipate the attack. Detectives investigating Amanda's death questioned her college friends, learning she was cautious and avoided strangers, drugs, and criminals. Her best friend confirmed she had no enemies on campus. Despite this, they considered that someone might have secretly targeted her. Reviewing college security footage and reports from the past year, they searched for suspicious incidents but found nothing useful. The police revisited the Anderson family to inquire about Amanda's personal life, suspecting a personal motive behind the brutal crime due to the multiple wounds. Amanda's mother was baffled by the incident, describing her daughter as a kind and diligent student who regularly attended church. Although Amanda didn't have a boyfriend at the time of her death, her mother revealed that she had met someone about a year prior, but their relationship ended. The police sought out this individual to learn more about his connection with Amanda and the reasons behind their breakup. Upon questioning, the man revealed that he and Amanda shared some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never developed a romantic relationship. They had gone out together a few times, but it didn't progress further. When asked about the last time he saw Amanda, he stated that it was the day before her murder. The police started their investigation again from the beginning, re-examining all the evidence. They focused on Nate's 911 call, which was the starting point of the case. During the call, Nate claimed he didn't enter his sister's room and that someone had shot Amanda. The investigators realized it was impossible for someone standing in the doorway to know Amanda was shot in the head, or how many times, without entering the room. The police revisited the Anderson house and inspected the door, which Nate said was opened when he got home. Although there were scratches on the door, the lock was intact, leading the police to believe someone was trying to make it look like the door was kicked in. The crime lab analyzed the weapons found in the Anderson house and concluded that one of the pistols was likely the weapon used to shoot Amanda. After a thorough investigation, detectives reached a conclusion. All evidence pointed to a family member as Amanda's killer. The murder weapon, a pistol, was hidden in a secure location, suggesting the killer knew exactly where to find it. Moreover, the killer returned the gun to its hiding place after the crime. On the night of the murder, Amanda's parents had solid alibis. Her father was dining with a friend, and her mother was at work. This left only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother Nate in the house. To find answers, investigators delved deeper into the events of that evening. It turned out that Amanda's father, Mark, had called her to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received a call from Nate, who was crying and claimed someone had shot Amanda. However, this call raised a disturbing question. Why did Nate call his father before calling emergency services, unless he was trying to cover his tracks after murdering his own sister? The police required solid proof before making any accusations, as they didn't want to cause further distress to Amanda and Nate's parents. To gather more information, the investigators decided to question Mark Anderson, Nate's father, without directly accusing his son of involvement. During the conversation, Nate's parents became aware that the police suspected their son. When asked about Nate's recent use of the .22 caliber pistol, Mark revealed that he had given the gun to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, and that Nate had fired it in their backyard. The officers went back to the Anderson house and found .22 caliber casings in the backyard that matched the bullets found in Amanda's body. While this was suspicious, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, 2 weeks later, a crucial clue was found. Nate's clothes, which he wore when he claimed to have found his sister dead, were tested with luminol, revealing traces of blood. Further analysis by a national blood spatter expert suggested that Nate was either in the room when the shooting occurred or was the one who fired the fatal shots. The tests confirmed that his clothes had Amanda's blood on them. Despite this, the Anderson siblings seemed to have a loving relationship. Photos showed them being affectionate, and their parents described them as best friends who often made videos together, including one just days before Amanda's death. The police were left wondering what could have driven Nate to commit such a heinous act. On November 10, 2010, police arrested Nate Anderson at a church, suspecting him of murdering his own sister. The accusation shocked everyone who knew him, as it seemed out of character. The trial began February 2012 and pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime. He confessed to a psychologist and his parents that he had killed Amanda. In a statement, Nate and Amanda's parents shared Nate's confession. According to Mark Anderson, Nate told him that he shot Amanda with a pistol found in their home and asked for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, the mother, expressed the immense difficulty she experienced as a mother who loves both her children. Nate Anderson has been sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believes that agreeing to the plea deal was in Nate's best interest, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Regarding the motive behind the crime, Nate's attorneys declined to provide details, saying only that they know what happened and are choosing not to discuss it further. However, they did reveal that Nate has shown remorse for his actions, has asked for forgiveness, and has received it. The attorneys described the process of coming to terms with what happened as difficult and emotional. The authorities have determined that the incident was a hate crime, as there was no evidence of any other trauma. According to the Smith County Sheriff's Office, Nate will be eligible to apply for parole in 2 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie Sepich's mom described her as an outgoing, vibrant, and intelligent 22-year-old. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, Katie was the eldest of 3 siblings. She earned a business degree from New Mexico State University and was planning to pursue her MBA in the fall. In addition to her studies, Katie worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, she met Joe Bischoff, and their initial friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Katie confided in her mom, Diane, about her happiness with Joe and her desire to build a future together. Months later, Joe proposed to Katie with a diamond ring, making her dreams seem within reach. However, after they graduated in the summer of 2003, their relationship began to struggle. They faced challenges when Katie decided to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city 350 miles from Las Cruces. Katie was devastated when Joe had to leave, making their long-distance relationship extremely difficult. Despite the challenges, they found ways to reunite occasionally. One such opportunity arose on Labor Day weekend in 2003, when Joe visited Katie and Katie was ecstatic. However, their reunion took a devastating turn. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie enjoyed a fun night out with Joe and their friends, visiting several bars before ending up at a local house party. But after that, Katie vanished. The next day, Katie's mother, Diane, received a life-changing phone call. Diane recalled the moment she discovered her daughter was missing. She described how, on August 31st, 2003, her family had woken up to a beautiful day filled with friends and family as they prepared to celebrate Labor Day weekend with a cookout. Then, at 2:15 that afternoon, the phone had rung, Veronica asking if they had talked to Katie that day. Veronica, Katie's roommate, was frantically calling everyone who knew Katie, trying to find out if they had seen her. She had already contacted all of Katie's friends and even checked with local hospitals, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. According to Veronica, Katie had left a party alone the previous night. Veronica and her boyfriend Joe had stayed behind and fallen asleep at the party house. They assumed Katie had gone home, but when they woke up the next morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Katie's family immediately notified the police and filed a missing persons report. Shortly after, a disturbing discovery was made near a desert landfill. A deceased female body, partially undressed and exhibiting clear signs of a recent and intentional murder. The police were called to the scene and found no identification near the body. However, they could tell that the body had been there for no more than a day. The victim appeared to be between 20 and 25 years old, and the fact that she was naked from the waist down suggested that the motive behind the crime was likely sexual. The victim's body showed signs of strangulation, leading investigators to initially suspect it as the cause of death. Upon closer inspection, they noticed no signs of struggle near the body, indicating that she likely died elsewhere and was moved to the desert landfill to delay discovery. Further examination revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting the perpetrator attempted to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting her on fire. The police soon connected the dots between Katie's disappearance and the unidentified body. Katie's father was tasked with identifying the body at the morgue, an experience that left him and his wife, Gianna, shattered. The body was their daughter, Katie. The police's first step was to interview Katie's roommate, Veronica, and her boyfriend, Joe. It was unusual that they stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, claiming that Katie had left her belongings behind. The detective retraced Katie's likely route, knocking on doors and speaking with residents, hoping to gather information. Unfortunately, no one reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. However, one discovery suggested that Katie may have reached her house but never entered it. Katie left her house without her keys. The investigator found her shoes outside her bedroom window, suggesting she tried to sneak back in. It looks like someone attacked her at that moment, as evidenced by footprints in the gravel. Katie put up a fight, but sadly, her attacker was too strong. The police think the killer then took her body to a desert landfill and tried to burn. The investigation focused on the party Katie attended earlier that night, which about 40 people went to. It's possible someone followed her home and attacked her. Could it have been her boyfriend, Joe? The police interviewed everyone at the party and discovered something important that Joe hadn't mentioned. Katie saw him kissing another girl, which led to a fight and her decision to leave alone, forgetting her purse. Katie was furious and wanted to escape the party as quickly as possible. However, when the police first questioned Joe, he didn't mention the argument they had. He also didn't tell Katie's parents, who were wondering why she left the party alone, about the fight. Later, the investigators questioned Joe again, telling him they knew about the argument because Katie saw him kissing another girl. Joe admitted it was true. He claimed that after Katie left, he followed her in his car, but only drove up to her house and didn't go inside. He thought she was asleep because her bedroom light was off, so he returned to the party. It turned out Joe wasn't at the party when Katie was attacked. None of the partygoers could confirm exactly when Joe got back. He might have had time to commit the crime, take Katie's body to the desert, and return to the party. When the investigators questioned the party attendees, they found another suspicious detail. After returning to the party, Joe started calling Katie's cell phone, which was in her purse. He found the phone when it started ringing and knew it belonged to Katie. Despite this, Joe continued calling her phone until morning. The investigators were puzzled by Joe's behavior and wondered if he was trying to create an alibi or feign concern for his girlfriend Katie. They wanted to question him further, but Joe refused to cooperate with the police. His absence from Katie's funeral only fueled their suspicion. The investigators needed to obtain his DNA sample and compare it to the DNA evidence found on Katie's body. The evidence included human skin cells discovered under her fingernails, which were identical in all 3 locations. However, getting Joe's DNA sample proved to be a challenge. He was out of town, and his parents had hired a lawyer who informed the police that Joe was refusing to provide a DNA sample. Looking at Joe's suspicious behavior, everyone was convinced he was hiding something and possibly involved in Katie's death. The police needed a legitimate way to obtain his DNA to confirm their suspicions, but it took time. While they worked on that, they also explored other leads, investigating similar cases to see if Katie was the only victim. The DNA samples found on Katie's body didn't match anyone in the national database. So, the investigators went back to the party where it all started. They asked all the male attendees to provide a DNA sample, and everyone agreed since they had nothing to hide. However, none of their DNA samples matched the one found on Katie's body, which led the investigators back to Joe. He was the only one who refused to provide his DNA, but the police found another way to get it. They discovered that Joe and Katie had been intimate in her bedroom before the party. The police took the bedsheet from Katie's room, hoping to find Joe's DNA, and they were successful. However, the male DNA found on the bedsheet didn't match the one found on Katie's body, clearing Joe of any involvement in her death. This raised another question. Why had Joe refused to cooperate with the police if he wasn't involved in Katie's death? After receiving the test results from the police, Joe's lawyer informed him that he was no longer a suspect. With this new information, Joe decided to cooperate with the police and provide a DNA sample. The subsequent test confirmed the initial finding: Joe was not involved in Katie's murder. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he worried that his DNA would be found on her body. Despite being cleared, the circumstances surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unclear to both the police and Katie's family. With Joe no longer a suspect, the investigation turned its focus to other leads. Several partygoers reported that Katie wore rings, including one given to her by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed the killer must have removed them. Although they searched local pawn shops, Katie's jewelry was never found. Another potential clue was a set of tire tracks near where Katie's body was discovered. Forensic experts were able to identify the brand and model of the tires. The manufacturer informed the police that these tires were commonly used on pickup trucks. The case of Katie's murder reached a dead end until a similar crime occurred in Green Bay, Wisconsin, about a year later. A girl was attacked and set on fire, but miraculously, she survived by pretending to be dead until her attackers left. She sought help at a nearby house and described her assailants to the police as 2 Hispanic males. The police published sketches of the suspects, which led a farmer to identify them as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Las Cruces, where Katie was killed, and often visited them. They were arrested, and the police believed they had finally caught Katie's killer. However, DNA analysis proved otherwise. The DNA samples from the Wisconsin suspects did not match the DNA evidence found on Katie's body, leaving the case still unsolved. Two men, Neo and Morales, were later found guilty of assaulting a girl in Green Bay, but they were not involved in Katie's case. Neo received a 70-year prison sentence, while Morales got 50 years. This led to another dead end in the investigation. The police were left with only two pieces of evidence: tire tracks from the crime scene and DNA samples from the perpetrator. On December 18, 2006, a significant breakthrough occurred in the investigation when a lab discovered a DNA sample matching the one found on Katie's body. The DNA belonged to 26-year-old Gabriel Avila, a married father with a lengthy criminal record. Notably, Avila had been released from prison shortly before Katie's murder, and he had no prior connection to her. Just 3 months after Katie's brutal murder, Avila was arrested on November 13, 2003, for breaking into the apartment of two young women while wielding a knife. They managed to protect themselves by locking themselves in the bathroom and calling 911. Avila was subsequently convicted of aggravated burglary with intent to commit aggravated assault in March 2004. However, Avila was released on bond and promptly became a fugitive. Unfortunately, the system's flaws delayed his connection to Katie's death by 3.5 years. Avila evaded authorities for nearly a year before being apprehended in November 2004, thanks to a tip. He could have been arrested as early as 3 months after Katie's attack, but the imperfections in the system allowed him to remain at large. Avila was sentenced to 9 years in prison, but it wasn't until 2 years into his sentence that a DNA sample was finally tested. The results showed a partial match with DNA evidence found at Katie's crime scene, prompting investigators to take swift action. They quickly located the truck Avila had used to dump Katie's body and found a ring belonging to Katie in the center console. The detectives investigating Katie's case visited Avila in prison after discovering Katie's ring in his truck. Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that he had been in the area that night to buy illegal substances while his wife was away. He claimed to have seen Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later, Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He claimed to have stopped and offered to help her, saying she was unable to get into her house because she didn't have her purse. Katie had planned to enter her bedroom through the window, but Avila attacked her, undressed her, and committed the crime. Avila removed Katie's clothes and then, fearing she would identify him, decided to strangle her. During the struggle, he grabbed her throat and found himself unable to let go. After killing her, Avila placed her body in his pickup truck and drove to a desert landfill, where he dumped her body. Avila attempted to destroy evidence by setting Katie's body on fire, but this failed. A DNA sample was later taken from Avila and matched with evidence found on Katie's body in 2003. At the time, however, it was illegal in most states, including New Mexico, to take DNA samples from those arrested. DNA was only entered into the system after a conviction and subsequent imprisonment. This led Katie's parents to campaign for a law that would require those arrested for violent crimes to submit a DNA sample, which would then be added to the national database. They fought to have this law, named after their daughter, passed in all 50 states. Katie's Law, which was passed in New Mexico in 2006 with near-unanimous support, allows for the collection of DNA samples from individuals arrested for certain crimes. Thanks to the persistent efforts of Katie's parents, the law was made federal in 2010 and has since been adopted by over 31 states. The trial of Gabriel Avila started in 2017. During the trial, Avila apologized to Katie's family and expressed remorse. However, his lawyer asked the judge to be lenient, stating that Avila had shown remorse. On the other hand, District Attorney Susana Martinez argued that Avila only confessed after being confronted with DNA evidence more than 3 years after the crime. At the sentencing, Katie's father, David, begged the judge not to show leniency. He passionately argued that since they would never get to see their daughter again, Avila shouldn't be allowed to experience freedom again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 after serving 30 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Lynn Plass was born on December 11, 1990 in Choppy, Massachusetts, where she grew up with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Her mother, Michelle Myers, described Amanda as a free-spirited individual who often seemed out of place in the present time. In 2011, Amanda was working as a waitress at a local restaurant in Choppy and was in a relationship with a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. Tragedy struck on August 26, 2011. Seth called 911 and reported that he had found Amanda lying unresponsive in the kitchen of her apartment. When police and paramedics arrived, they found that Amanda was already deceased from multiple stab wounds to her chest, throat, and abdomen. The scene was immediately cordoned off and investigations were initiated. Seth was found sitting on the porch, visibly distressed and emotional. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment for evidence, but the perpetrator had managed to escape the scene. The investigation was ongoing, with the goal of identifying the person responsible for Amanda's murder and bringing them to justice. Detectives began their investigation at the crime scene, where they found a significant amount of blood splatter in the kitchen, indicating that this was where the attack occurred. The evidence suggested that a knife was the likely murder weapon, and it was taken by the perpetrator. Further analysis revealed visible shoe prints from Nike sneakers on the floor and broken window glass, bearing a palm print in one of the rooms. Given the type and number of wounds on Amanda's body, detectives suspected that the perpetrator was someone Amanda knew, and the motive was likely a personal vendetta. As a result, they brought Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green, in for questioning at the police station. When Seth arrived at the police station, he appeared visibly shaken, overcome with emotion over the loss of his girlfriend. The investigators were interested in determining his emotional response. During the interrogation, Seth explained that he had spent the entire day at work and had planned to give Amanda a ride to her workplace, but was unable to do so due to his own work schedule. Seth had a limited relationship with Amanda, but he loved her and had no motive to harm her. As a carpenter, Seth used various tools at work, including a knife on his tool belt. However, he consistently left his tools at work after his shift, and this day was no exception. After finishing his work, Seth changed his clothes, left his tools behind, and went to meet Amanda. He understood why he was the main suspect, but he denied any involvement in her death. The police investigation confirmed Seth's alibi, and he passed a polygraph test. Additionally, the boots he was wearing when the police arrived didn't match the Nike sneakers found at the crime scene, further ruling out his involvement. Amanda's tragic death led to a complex investigation. Initially, the police explored the possibility that her ex-boyfriend was involved, but further inquiry ruled him out as a suspect. He provided a DNA sample and fingerprints, which did not match the evidence found at the crime scene. Moreover, he had a solid alibi, eliminating him from the list of potential perpetrators. The family's pain deepened when they found out that some police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body while the state police were on their way to the crime scene. These officers shared the disturbing images with other officers and civilians, breaking the family's trust with the authorities and adding to their emotional pain. The case remained stagnant for approximately 2 years until investigators decided to review the evidence again. During this review, a crucial clue was discovered on a dry erase board in Amanda's bedroom. The message, "Dennis was here 8/11, had gone unnoticed until then. Considering the date, This message became significant. It was just 15 days before Amanda's body was discovered in her apartment. The revelation sparked questions. Who was Dennis, and was he connected to Amanda's death? The police had not come across this name throughout the entire investigation. Detectives analyzed Amanda's phone records and social media posts to see if she had any connections to someone named Dennis. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported to the police that her apartment had been broken into several times when she was not home. Amanda suspected a young man whose name started with the letter D. She knew this man and wanted to resolve the issue peacefully, so she decided to talk to him first. During their meeting, Amanda tried to discuss the break-ins, but the man denied any involvement. When Amanda mentioned that a neighbor had seen him in her apartment, she politely asked him to return her stolen belongings. However, the man left. The investigation then focused on identifying the man named Dennis, who was suspected of being involved in Amanda's death. The police found a man named Dennis Rosa Roman living 3 blocks from the scene of the crime. A background check revealed that Dennis had a history of breaking and entering. Although there was no palm print to match the one found at Amanda's home, the police still wanted to question Dennis. They located him in Westfield, Massachusetts, and invited him to the station for an informal conversation. However, Dennis declined the invitation. But in November 2013, Dennis voluntarily visited the police station. The police questioned Dennis about his relationship with Amanda, and he acknowledged knowing her from Chappie, but claimed he hadn't seen her in a couple of years, which was true since Amanda had been deceased for a couple of years. When asked if he had ever visited Amanda's apartment, Dennis denied ever being there and stated that he didn't know her well. He admitted to occasionally selling weed to Amanda, which was how they occasionally interacted. During the interrogation, Dennis agreed to provide a DNA swab and revealed the size of his shoes, which matched the one found at the crime scene. However, the police noted that Dennis's Nike Air Max shoes had a different tread pattern than the ones that left bloody tracks at the crime scene. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions, promising to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Initially, the police didn't have sufficient grounds to arrest Dennison, so he was released. This decision was made despite concerns that he might flee and hinder the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Amanda and Dennis had made several phone calls to each other on July 28, 2011. The phone records showed that Amanda initiated 4 calls, while Dennis initiated 5 calls. When Dennis returned to the police station a few days later, his story changed. He now claimed that he had communicated with Amanda about break-ins at her apartment when she wasn't home. Amanda didn't report the incidents because nothing of value was stolen. The investigators found this story unconvincing, particularly since they had heard about the alleged break-ins multiple times before. Their suspicions grew, and they strongly suspected that Dennis was actually the person responsible for breaking into Amanda's apartment. As Rosa Roman continued to alter his initial statement, the investigators became more confident that he was hiding something crucial to the case. The priority shifted to uncovering the truth about his involvement in Amanda's death and determining what secrets he was trying to conceal. When investigators showed Dennis a photo of a dry erase board with the message, "Dennis was here," on August 11, 2011, he initially admitted to writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never entered Amanda's apartment. This admission was significant, as it directly implicated him in the crime. Furthermore, DNA results confirmed that Dennis had given false testimony, as his DNA matched the DNA found under Amanda's fingernails, and his palm print was found on a glass at the crime scene. After realizing that the police had gathered sufficient evidence for his arrest, Dennis changed his story for the 3rd time. He now claimed that he had been present at the crime scene and had attempted to save Amanda from the attacker. However, he refused to name the alleged attacker, citing concerns for his and his family's safety. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the person he claimed was responsible for Amanda's death. Dennis described the alleged attacker as a tall, white, light-skinned individual with blue eyes, weighing between 170 and 200 pounds. He also claimed that the person was wearing old pants, dirty boots, and a t-shirt with the phrase, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Despite this new information, detectives did not believe Dennis's story, as all the evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator of the crime. As a result, Dennis was arrested and charged with Amanda's murder. The trial took place almost 3 years after Amanda's death and centered around the debate over whether Dennis was responsible for her murder. His lawyers presented the argument that although Dennis was at the crime scene, he did not commit the murder. Instead, they accused the police of botching the investigation and framing Dennis after their efforts to find the perpetrator failed. Dennis claimed that his involvement in Amanda's death was involuntary. He stated that his dealer forced him to collect a debt at her apartment. Dennis allegedly tried to help Amanda, but couldn't stop the dealer. He cited his DNA under her nails as evidence, saying she grabbed his hand during the incident. In contrast, the prosecutors had a different explanation for the events leading to Amanda's death. They believed that Dennis was breaking into Amanda's apartment while she was not home and that she had caught him. During one of these break-ins, Dennis allegedly left an inscription with his name on a board. Amanda assumed that Dennis was the trespasser who had stolen from her, and that is why she called him and asked him to return the stolen items. This explained the multiple phone calls between Amanda and Dennis on the day she died. Dennis, the killer of Amanda, mistakenly believed Amanda was already at work, re-entered her apartment, and ultimately took her life in a fit of anger during a dispute. A jury convicted Dennis of the crime after 8 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation. Dennis received a life sentence in prison with no possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kira Steger. Kira Steger was born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois, to parents Marcy and Jay Steger. They remembered her as a vibrant, dedicated, and kind-hearted person. At the time of her disappearance, Kira worked at 2 stores in the Mall of America, Wet Seal and Delia's. Her co-workers were not only close friends, but also like family to her. Kira had a remarkable ability to recognize people's hidden strengths and had a promising future ahead of her. However, her life took a tragic turn when she mysteriously vanished on February 21, 2013. On the day she disappeared, Kira had a shift at work and was looking forward to a dinner date with her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, at a nice restaurant after her shift ended. Kira and Jeffrey had met 3 years prior and quickly fell in love, eventually getting married. To those around them, they appeared to be a happy and stable couple, with only occasional disagreements that they kept private. Neither their relatives, friends, nor co-workers were aware of any significant issues in their relationship. On Saturday, February 23rd, Kira's co-workers became concerned when she failed to show up to work. She was known for being punctual, strict, and adhering to her schedule. When they couldn't reach Kira, they called her husband Jeffrey. According to Jeffrey, Kira had left their house the previous morning and hadn't returned. While this wasn't entirely unusual, as Kira would occasionally spend the night at a friend's or relative's house without warning, the severe snowstorm that day was a cause for concern. Jeffrey speculated that Kira's car might have gotten stuck and her phone battery could have died, leaving her unable to communicate. Jeffrey filed a missing persons report for his wife Kira after not hearing from her, and he also contacted her family to inform them of her disappearance. Her family was shocked and deeply disturbed by the news. Upon receiving the report, detectives launched an investigation into Kira's disappearance. As is standard procedure, they began by questioning Jeffrey and searching the surrounding area. Detectives visited Jeffrey at his home to ask him about Kira's disappearance. He told them that on the previous Thursday, he and Kira had spent time together, having dinner, talking, bowling, and then leaving the mall. According to Jeffrey, they went straight home after that, where Kira planned to watch a movie. Jeffrey also reported that Kira left their house the following Friday morning around 8:30 a.m. to attend a mandatory work event. He stated that Kira was acting normally and didn't appear to be behaving strangely before she left. Jeffrey wasn't concerned about Kira's frequent disappearances, despite not knowing her whereabouts. They had minor relationship issues, but Jeffrey didn't consider them serious. When questioned, he dismissed the possibility of Kira having a lover, citing a previous conversation where she denied it. Jeffrey claimed to trust and love his wife. Investigators relayed information to patrol units and visited the Mall of America to verify Jeffrey's testimony. The Mall of America in Bloomington is one of the largest shopping malls in the world. As such, the mall is equipped with multiple security cameras. Detectives investigated Kira's disappearance by reviewing the footage from the time she left work on February 21st. The footage showed nothing unusual. Jeffrey's account was confirmed, as the footage showed that he met Kira after work, and they spent time together at the mall before leaving. There were no signs of arguments or trouble. Kira's family was struggling with her disappearance, and their anxiety grew as the days passed. They decided to take action and travel to Bloomington to help with the investigation. They created flyers with her picture and posted them around town, hoping to attract attention to the search. The investigators questioned neighbors and obtained footage from a security camera that partially captured Kira and Jeffrey's home. Kira's cell phone records also became available, revealing a significant new lead. A man named Ryan Wendt, a manager at a store where Kira worked, with whom she had a long-term and intense relationship. Police investigated Ryan after learning he'd traveled out of state during Kira's disappearance, raising suspicions due to his past romantic relationship with her and their concurrent out-of-state moves. Detectives sought to determine whether his actions were coincidental or incriminating. The detectives managed to locate Ryan in Colorado and asked him to answer questions. During the questioning, Ryan stated that he had last been in contact with Kira via text messages while driving through South Dakota. He said these messages were sent shortly before Kira disappeared. The police analyzed the timing of these messages and discovered that Kira had been texting with Ryan while she was having dinner with Jeffrey. It was clear that Kira was distancing herself from Jeffrey. The investigators examined Ryan's phone and credit card records to verify his location. Their analysis indicated that Ryan was indeed out of state that evening and had no connection to Kira's disappearance. Based on this information, Ryan was eliminated as a suspect. Further analysis of the messages revealed that Kira had been texting with Ryan even after she returned home with Jeffrey. However, her phone activity ceased at 11:44 p.m., and she has not been active since. A team of investigators reviewed video footage from a surveillance camera at Kira's neighbor's house. The camera's rapid movement made it difficult to observe, but it did capture Jeffrey and Kira's house for a few seconds. According to Jeffrey, they returned home after dinner and bowling, watched a movie, and went to bed. However, the footage showed Kira's car backing into the yard at 2 a.m. and driving away, despite the poor video quality and constant motion. Jeffrey claimed he drove to the gas station to fill up Kira's car, as she had asked him to do before her commute the next day. His alibi checked out, as he was indeed seen at the gas station around 3:30 a.m. However, after leaving the gas station, he didn't return home. Instead, he headed towards the highway, but his exact destination is unknown. Although a neighbor's camera didn't capture him returning home, it's possible he may have arrived when the camera was facing a different direction. Kira's Chevrolet was seen leaving her residence at 9:21 a.m., but the driver's identity couldn't be determined. A missing person report was filed on February 23rd. On February 25th, police received a call about a suspicious vehicle near Kira's workplace. The vehicle had been parked in a multi-story parking lot for several days and was found with suspicious red smudges on the trunk lid. Kira's white Chevy was found with signs of a tragic event, including a few small bloodstains. Her purse, containing divorce court forms, was recovered from the vehicle. A rolled-up trunk mat with dark stains, later confirmed to be her blood, was discovered behind the car. The car left the house at 9:21 a.m. and was captured on camera at the mall 20 minutes later. Unfortunately, there was no camera in the parking lot where the car was eventually found, but there was a camera that captured footage of the path leading to the car. After reviewing the footage, detectives noticed a man wearing a hoodie, which was not unusual given the cold weather, walking after the car had entered the parking lot. The man crossed the street and approached a taxi stand, where he had a brief conversation with a driver before getting into the car and driving off. The police were able to identify the taxi company and determine which car the man had ridden in by tracking the time of the interaction. Since the cabs were equipped with GPS tracking devices, the police were able to determine that the man ended his trip a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house and paid for the ride in cash before getting out of the car. As the cab drove away from the neighborhood, it was caught on camera by the same surveillance camera that had partially captured Kira and Jeffrey's residence. 2 minutes later, a man wearing a hoodie with a distinctive white logo entered the camera's frame. Although the poor video quality made it hard to discern his face, investigators suspected that the man was likely Jeffrey, given that Kira was missing and the man with the hooded sweatshirt was seen entering Kira and Jeffrey's house. Law enforcement officers executed a search warrant and visited the house, finding numerous dark red stains in the bedroom, including nearly 100 on the mattress. After rearranging and cleaning the room, investigators used luminol to reveal additional stains on the carpet that were not visible to the naked eye. The stains, which originated in the bedroom, were confirmed to be Kira's blood, leading investigators to believe she was likely no longer alive. A search of Jeffrey's car found no blood or signs of a struggle, but a gas station receipt indicated a purchase was made with his card 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned. Detectives went to the gas station to review the security footage. The footage showed Jeffrey filling up his car and then going inside to withdraw cash from an ATM. This gave them a clear view of Jeffrey's face and revealed a logo on his jacket that matched the one seen on the man in the earlier footage. Based on this new evidence and the evidence found at the house, 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino was arrested. He was taken to the police station for questioning and became the main suspect. Jeffrey contacted his attorney during the interrogation and was advised to remain silent. The police had enough evidence to charge him, but needed to find Kira's body to prove his guilt. After months of searching by the police, Kira's family and volunteers, a suspicious bag was found by the side of the road at Keller Lake, near Trevino's house, as the snow began to melt in late March. A bag containing a bloodied pillow, shirt, and bra was discovered, and forensic analysis revealed that the items had Kira's DNA on them. Although the search of the lake was hindered by the presence of ice, divers searched the water body, but unfortunately, no remains were found. The area around the lake was also thoroughly searched using 4 trained search dogs, but these efforts were unsuccessful. 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, a disturbing call on May 8, 2013, led police to a body in the Mississippi River. Body was identified through dental records as Kira Steger, with severe blunt force trauma and a fractured index finger, making her exact cause of death impossible to determine due to decomposition. To uncover the truth, investigators worked to rebuild the sequence of events surrounding Kira's death. Their theory was as follows. When Kira and Jeffrey arrived home, he discovered that she was texting someone else, which made him suspicious. Kira refused to let him see the messages, leading Jeffrey to violently take her phone and break her finger in the process. Upon reading the romantic messages, Jeffrey's anger intensified, ultimately driving him to kill Kira. After committing the crime, he attempted to erase any evidence of his wrongdoing. Jeffrey used Kira's car to transport her body to a house, where he put it in the trunk. He then stopped at a gas station before driving to a river, where he disposed of the body. On his way back home, he threw away a bag containing Kira's pillow and clothes. The next day, he went to a gas station to withdraw cash from an ATM, knowing he would need it to pay for a taxi, after abandoning Kira's car in a mall parking lot. After getting rid of the car, Jeffrey returned home and spent the rest of the day cleaning the house. Jeffrey's goal was to make it seem like Kira had driven away from her car on her own that morning and was unharmed. However, surveillance footage foiled his plan. In October 2013, a jury found Jeffrey Trevino guilty, agreeing that his actions were not planned in advance, but rather the result of a heated argument that escalated into violence after he discovered Kira's infidelity. Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison in November 2013. He will be eligible for parole in 2031. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ekaterina Bauman. Ekaterina Bulgova was born on May 13, 1989 in Leningrad, a city that would later be renamed St. Petersburg. In 2009, Ekaterina, then 20 years old, traveled to Turkey with her family for a vacation. That's where she met Walter Bauman, a German citizen who was 13 years older than her. Walter had received his education in Germany and had a good income, but his personal life was lacking. He was searching for the perfect woman, but he didn't quite fit the criteria of a perfect man. He still lived with his parents, didn't take care of his appearance, and had a sloppy style. He often met women online, and many of them were Russian. Ekaterina and Walter got married in a luxurious ceremony. After the wedding, they moved into Walter's parents' home, which proved to be a challenging experience for Ekaterina. Living with Walter's parents was not easy, and this marked the beginning of problems for Ekaterina after her move to Germany. The fairy tale romance was starting to lose its magic. Walter's mother, Ludmila, was a strong-willed woman who had achieved great success as an immigrant in Germany. However, she struggled to accept that her son Walter was now a grown man in his 30s and no longer needed her guidance. Ekaterina, Walter's wife, tried her best to please Ludmila, but Ludmila continued to interfere in their marriage and criticize Ekaterina. In 2017, Ekaterina became pregnant, and Walter decided to use some of his savings to buy a house, hoping that this new chapter would bring positive change to their relationship. Unfortunately, the move did not have the desired effect, as Ludmila continued to visit frequently and insert herself into their lives. The birth of their daughter brought even more tension to the relationship between Walter and Ekaterina. Walter became increasingly strict and controlling, speaking down to Ekaterina and restricting her freedom. He prohibited her from learning to drive a car and did not allow her to speak with their daughter in German. Ekaterina was confused and unsure of what was causing these changes in Walter's behavior. Walter and Ekaterina's relationship had become strained, and he would physically harm her, including beating her. Authorities were alerted to the domestic violence issue in late 2019, but the case was dismissed when they claimed they had reconciled. Ekaterina expressed concerns about Walter's behavior, citing his lack of interest in her, excessive work habits, and resulting burnout. Feeling constantly stressed and fearful, Ekaterina turned to a support center for domestic violence victims for the first time in fall 2020. When Ekaterina and their daughter left, Walter made an effort to reconcile with them, promising to change and acknowledging his past wrongdoing. He also told Ekaterina that he couldn't live without her and their daughter. Although Ekaterina forgave him and returned home with their daughter, their arguments persisted. When Walter recognized he had wronged Ekaterina, he would try to make amends with gifts or family trips. While this may have indicated a change in attitude towards Ekaterina, Walter's behavior towards their daughter was marked by total control. Walter was a calculated individual who dramatized situations and manipulated others to get what he wanted. He was extremely frugal and prioritized accumulating wealth. Those who knew him well described him as anxious and impatient. After Ekaterina became a mother, she made several trips to Russia with her husband Walter, who was concerned that she would return to Russia and keep him from seeing their daughter. As Ekaterina experienced more and more abuse from Walter, she began to consider divorce. Ekaterina's reason for staying with Walter was to protect her daughter, but she couldn't take her daughter back to Russia because Walter had to give his consent, which he refused to do. In August 2021, Ekaterina took her daughter to a women's crisis center, telling the administration that Walter had threatened to take her life. Social services considered placing a 5-year-old girl in an orphanage, a situation the Youth Affairs Department psychologists deemed severe. Although Katerina initially agreed to let the child enter foster care, her husband Walter and his mother objected, forcing the parents to care for their daughter temporarily. The family reunited weeks later, but Walter and Katerina started divorce proceedings and began living separately. Katerina's desire to return to Russia intensified, but Walter consented only if their daughter remained with him in Germany. At the start of 2022, Katerina traveled to St. Petersburg alone, meeting a Russian pilot from Omsk she had met online while there. After returning to Germany in mid-January 2022, Katerina continued to communicate with the pilot daily. Katerina, a 32-year-old woman, stopped contacting her family and her new lover on February 4, 2022, after returning to Germany. This was a surprise to her family, as she had been exchanging love messages with her new lover just a few weeks earlier. According to her husband Walter, Katerina left behind most of her belongings, including her phone, keys, clothes, and her 5-year-old daughter. She took only an empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from her husband's stash. This is the information Walter shared with the police on February 6, 2022, after Katerina's parents reached out to them to request a check because they couldn't reach Katerina for 2 days. Katerina's mother, Svetlana, reported that she learned about her daughter's disappearance in a strange way. She couldn't reach Katerina on the phone for a few days, and when she spoke with Walter, he claimed that he hadn't seen her since February 5th and that she wasn't responding because she didn't have enough money on her phone balance. The police waited 4 days before searching the Walter family's house where Katerina was last seen. By then, Walter had completed his renovations, which included painting the guest room floor and replacing a couch. He had also purchased a large quantity of cleaning supplies from a local store. The police investigation at the Baumann house found that the surveillance footage had mysteriously disappeared. A detection dog was brought in to search the house and garage, but although it seemed agitated, it didn't indicate finding anything specific. Initial tests found no evidence in the house or garage, but a knife and electric shocker were seized from the car. What raised suspicions was Walter's unusual behavior. He showed no concern for his missing wife, but expressed interest in gaining sole guardianship of their 5-year-old daughter. On March 1, 2022, 25 days after her disappearance, the horrific discovery of a suitcase containing human remains that washed up along the River Weser. The person who discovered the suitcase was horrified to find that it contained the fragments of a woman's body, packed in garbage bags. Unfortunately, not all of her body parts were present in the suitcase, as some were still missing. To make matters worse, the fragments were identified as those of 32-year-old Katerina Baumann. Coincidentally, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse where Katerina had previously gotten married. During a thorough search of the Walter family home, investigators found a variety of suspicious items, including a bottle of sedatives that matched the substance found in Katerina's blood. Additional discoveries included disposable gloves, foil, adhesive tapes, garbage bags, and cleaning products, as well as canisters containing acetic acid, solvents, and bleach. Notably, The police found a pink scarf matching the one Katerina wore in her last selfie near her body. They also discovered a set of suitcase keys and other incriminating items in the garage and shed. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that most of Katerina's personal belongings were absent, with her clothes thrown away and her wedding photo hidden behind the piano. One key piece of evidence turned up at the workplace of Ludmila Bauman, Walter's mother. The white jacket Katerina wore in her last selfie was found in a trash container. Katerina's phone was last connected to the network at 7:41 p.m. Later that evening, she made a video call to her new lover from her computer at 8:25 p.m., saying she would call him again after putting her child to bed. However, she never made that call, and her phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. 2 hours after her video call, her lover sent her a goodnight message, which she never read. A forensic examination revealed that Katerina died 2 hours after dinner, based on the analysis of her stomach contents. The examination also found strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood, and her hyoid bone was broken, indicating that she was strangled. The examination further showed that her body was mutilated using very sharp tools. The next morning, Walter briefly opened his car door at 7:22 a.m., and the car was driven off at 10:20 a.m., returning at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called Katerina's phone, likely to create the illusion that she had run away. He also sent her messages asking where she was in an attempt to maintain this illusion. Walter and his mother had a habit of chatting intensely through WhatsApp daily, but after February 4th, they suddenly stopped communicating, which was unusual for them. In the middle of February, Walter took his car to auto service and asked an employee to thoroughly clean the interior from top to bottom. This incident was later cited as evidence in a trial that began on August 26, 2022. The prosecutor argued that Walter had planned and executed the murder of his wife, Katerina, by slipping sedatives into her drink and then strangling her while she was asleep. Walter's motive was to avoid losing guardianship and potential financial losses in the event of a divorce. He had taken steps to prepare for Katerina's body disposal. Police found blood in the garage. Traces of her blood were also found on the carpet in the trunk of his car. Walter's phone and computer were seized by the police. He made several suspicious search queries, including how to avoid punishment for taking someone's life, dissolving human flesh with acid, and accessing other people's WhatsApp chats. He also searched for ways to die from sedatives and how to avoid conviction in Germany. Walter made around 500 search queries between December 2021 and February 2022, suggesting he planned the crime. On the day his wife disappeared, he searched for electric shocker twice. Forensic experts found evidence of electrocution on Katerina's body, suggesting Walter used a shocker to check if she was alive. In court, Walter wore his wedding ring and referred to himself as a widower. He remained silent, plugging his ears during testimonies, but showed emotion when his mother was called as a witness, crying and seeking her help with a prayer-like gesture. He had written to her asking for help, and she seemed willing to assist her son. Ludmila Bauman made a shocking statement, claiming she took Katerina's life, not her son. She visited her son's house at night to care for her granddaughter and found Katerina asleep on the couch. After a fight that started when Katerina hit her, Ludmila choked Katerina. She also admitted to performing certain actions with Katerina's body. It's possible Ludmila was motivated by her love for her son and took the blame for him. Despite her self-incrimination, Ludmila left the courtroom a free citizen as the jury and prosecutor's office didn't believe her statement, assuming she was trying to protect her son. Walter remained silent throughout the entire process, but during one of the final hearings, he read from his notes, which spanned 230 sheets of paper, covering his life, his experiences in Kazakhstan, and his love. His main message was that he loved Katerina and their daughter, but her emotional burnout and psychological problems led to frequent quarrels. Although his statement was extensive, he only briefly mentioned the night that changed everything. According to Walter, he was asleep when his mother took the life of his wife and dragged her into the garage. He blamed his mother for the crime, stating that she had betrayed him, used him, and sent him to prison. Addressing the judge, Walter said that his daughter had already lost her mother and should not lose her father as well. The most disturbing aspect of this story is not the gruesome details of the crime, but the fact that it all took place in front of the perpetrator's 5-year-old daughter. The Russian grandmother is currently barred from contacting her granddaughter, who has been placed with a German foster family. The daughter was present at home with her father when the crime occurred, and as a result, she has developed a psychotraumatic condition. She often mutters to herself, gesturing to her head and arms, indicating that she witnessed the traumatic event. According to her mother, Svetlana, the child is now living in a facility for traumatized children under a new name to protect her from the truth about her family. Svetlana is fighting to gain guardianship of her granddaughter, but German authorities are not allowing her to even have phone contact with the child. On May 23, 2023, the verdict was announced in the case of Walter Baumann. Walter received a life sentence, but under German law, he will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Ekaterina's ashes were buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Diane Holik. Diane Tammy Holik was born in 1958 in New York City and was known to her friends and family as a hardworking and joyful person. Her work ethic led to financial stability and her successful career. For over 20 years, she worked at IBM, a leading global technology company. In 1996, she relocated to Austin, Texas, where she held a senior position that allowed her to work remotely from her home office. Diane purchased a luxurious home in the suburbs of Austin and lived a privileged life, often hosting wine tastings, dining at upscale restaurants, and frequenting dance clubs. She was also involved in charity work and made efforts to improve her personal life. However, her life took a turn in mid-November 2001 when a severe storm warning was issued for Texas, bringing heavy rain and tornadoes to the Austin area. As a result, Diane worked from home on the morning of November 16th, but suddenly became unresponsive during a scheduled work call. Diane had multiple phones, but she wasn't answering any of them. Her co-workers left messages asking her to call back, but when she didn't respond, they grew concerned. They contacted the police department and requested that someone check on Diane at her home. When the officers arrived, Diane's neighbor offered a spare key, allowing the police to enter the house. Inside, they found an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of dogs emerging from the kitchen. As the police searched the house, they found Diane's body in the bedroom on the second floor. The detectives were called to the scene, and they were struck by the unusual cleanliness of the crime scene. There were no signs of theft, struggle, or forced entry. Diane's body was fully dressed and lying next to her bed. The detectives quickly realized that they were dealing with a crime. The investigation revealed distinct strangulation marks on Diane's neck, likely caused by a rope or similar object. Her wrists also showed signs of being bound with cable ties. The cleanliness of the house, the lack of stolen valuables, and the absence of forced entry led the detectives to believe that Diane's killer was someone she knew and trusted. They suspected that the killer was someone she had let into her home voluntarily. An investigation into Diane's death revealed no signs of forced intimacy, but detectives did find suspicious dark spots and red stains on the carpet near the bedroom entrance. A towel on the back of the sofa in the living room caught their attention due to its mismatch with the otherwise clean and orderly surroundings, prompting them to send it to the laboratory for examination. Diane's acquaintances reported that she had no known enemies, and the police discovered that she was in a romantic relationship with Dennis Conley, a man she had plans to spend her life with. Diane had been married before, but that marriage ended quickly. She met Dennis through a dating service, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Dennis was a businessman living in Houston, 150 miles from Austin, where Diane resided. Despite the distance, Diane and Dennis formed a close bond, with Dennis proposing to her after 2 months with a valuable platinum ring. However, according to Diane's friends, the relationship began to decline recently. Diane had been feeling controlled by Dennis at times. Diane was also troubled by the decision to relocate to Houston, which meant leaving her home in the suburbs of Austin. She put her house up for sale, but realtors struggled to find a buyer willing to pay the asking price of $435,000. This led detectives to suspect that Dennis might be involved in Diane's death, prompting them to invite him to the police station for a conversation. Dennis agreed to speak with them without a lawyer. The medical examiner determined that Diane died sometime between 3 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. Notably, the wedding ring Dennis had given her was missing from her finger, while her other jewelry remained untouched in the bedroom. This raised questions about the killer's motives and whether the ring was removed to mislead investigators. During the police interview, Dennis appeared to be a grieving man. He was asked about his relationship with Diane and his whereabouts on the day of her death and the day her body was found. Dennis claimed he was in Houston at the time. He stated that he last spoke with Diane on the morning of November 15th and spent the rest of the day at work without contacting her again. When he couldn't reach Diane the next morning, he left a message on her voicemail. The police took Dennis' fingerprints and DNA sample, but ultimately cleared him as a suspect after verifying his alibi. He had not left the city, so the detectives had to expand their search for a new lead. Further inquiry revealed that an unknown man had inspected Diane's house a few days before her death, claiming to be a potential buyer. He had planned to return with his wife to make a joint purchase decision. This clue became a top priority for the police, who began questioning the owners of properties for sale in the area, hoping that someone may have seen this mysterious buyer. Several women in the area reported that a suspicious man had visited their homes around the time of Diane's murder. He, described as being 35 to 45 years old with a large nose and dark hair, had arrived unaccompanied by a real estate agent. 6 of the women refused to let him in, but one allowed him to enter and view her home. She who let him in reported that he acted strangely, showing no interest in the layout of the house or its features. Instead, he specifically asked to see the bedroom on the 2nd floor. When she became uncomfortable and asked him to leave, he introduced himself as Walter Miller. The police searched their databases for anyone matching the name Walter Miller, but the individuals they found did not match his age or appearance. A forensic artist created a sketch of the suspect based on the women's descriptions. Diane's killer removed the cable ties that had bound her hands, but the rationale behind this action is unclear. Did he know his victim personally? A subsequent autopsy revealed no evidence of forced intimacy or assault, yet the police remained vigilant, returning to the crime scene to search for potential traces of semen. However, these efforts yielded nothing. A police sketch of a potential suspect in the Diane Wozniak case was broadcast on the evening news, urging anyone who recognized the person to come forward. One of the few leads investigators had was a towel from Diane's house with a few short hairs on it. But the hairs were rootless, making it impossible to obtain a complete DNA sample. A woman contacted the police after seeing the sketch and reported a similar encounter. She and her husband had put their house up for sale 6 months prior, and a man had come to visit, claiming he wanted to buy the house for cash and needed to see it first. However, she refused to let him in, and he left. 2 months later, the same man returned to her doorstep and introduced himself as Jim Taylor. She was home alone with her young daughter, as her husband had just left for work. He asked to look around the house, but she denied his request again. This time, he became angry and aggressive, yelling and demanding to be let in. She immediately recalled the encounter and remembered writing down his name and the license plate number of his minivan. The police now had a crucial lead to investigate. A search of the vehicle's registration revealed that the owner was not Jim Taylor, but Patrick Anthony Russo. Initially, Russo seemed like an unlikely suspect. He was a married man with 2 children, lived 40 minutes outside of Austin, and was a member of a church music band. However, a deeper look into his past revealed a disturbing history of violent crimes against women. Russo had been convicted of a series of attacks, including one that involved abducting and attempting to strangle a victim with cable ties. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison but was released on parole after serving only 8 years. While in prison, he met his future wife, Janet, a church volunteer. The police found it hard to believe that Russo's connection to the case was mere coincidence. The police visited Anthony Russo's house with a search warrant, and he seemed unsurprised by their arrival. Although they found no evidence of Diane's belongings, including her ring, in his house or minivan, a neighbor reported seeing a similar vehicle at Diane's house on the day she died. In the utility room, investigators discovered cable ties identical to those that left marks on Diane's wrists. However, these ties are widely available at hardware stores. The police asked Anthony to come to the station for further questioning, where they inquired about his whereabouts on November 15th and 16th. Anthony claimed that on the 15th, he drove to Austin to visit a religious radio station but was unable to enter because no one answered the door. Notably, the radio station was near Diane's house. He stated that he left the station around 4 p.m. but got lost due to a hurricane, arriving home around 6 p.m. This alibi is questionable, as the forensic medical expert reported that Diane died between 3 p.m. and 3 a.m. Russo was questioned by the police about whether he was looking to buy a house. He claimed he had not inquired about any properties for buy, which would later prove to be an important statement. When shown a photo of Diane, Russo remained impassive and denied having met her. With no evidence connecting him to the crime, the police had no choice but to release him. However, when detectives investigated further by visiting a radio station Russo had mentioned, they discovered that his previous statement was a fabrication. The employees at a local business explained that they didn't lock the doors during a tornado warning because a large crowd had gathered in the lobby. Meanwhile, a woman who was selling her house contacted the police after encountering a man who resembled the suspect in a recent crime. She had been at home with her child when he came to her door, claiming to be interested in buying a house. He was holding a pamphlet with real estate listings, including her own home. She allowed him into her home, but when she showed him a bedroom, he attempted to attack her. However, he quickly fled when he heard her child crying in the next room. She retained the pamphlet, which was later given to the police. They found a clear fingerprint on the pamphlet, which belonged to Anthony Russo. Russo denied ever looking at houses for sale, but the fingerprint proved he had lied to the police. Russo's false statement was a misdemeanor, and since he was still on probation, it was a violation of his parole conditions. The police arrested him, fearing that he might flee while they searched for evidence linking him to the death of Diane. To ensure public safety, the authorities decided to keep Russo in custody. The police were able to locate 15 women who had showed homes to a man who matched Anthony Russo's description. All 15 women were asked to identify the suspect from a lineup of 5 men who were similarly dressed and had similar appearances. However, only 10 of the women were able to positively identify Russo as he who had visited them to view homes. The remaining 5 women were unable to make an identification. Despite this, the police still had reason to believe Russo was involved in the crime and brought him in for further questioning. During the interrogation, Russo continued to deny any involvement in the crime, but eventually stopped answering questions and requested to see his wife. Meanwhile, the police received the results of a DNA analysis from the laboratory. The results showed that a hair found on a towel at the victim's home matched Russo's DNA profile. While this was a significant piece of evidence, it was not conclusive, as there was a small chance that the hair could have belonged to someone else with the same DNA profile. Despite the accumulation of circumstantial evidence, the police still lacked a direct link between Russo and the victim's death. Investigation revealed two key pieces of evidence that implicated in Diane's death. Firstly, cell phone data placed Russo in the same area as Diane on the day she died. Secondly, a thorough examination of Russo's home computer uncovered a disturbing search history. Russo frequently visited an adult website where he consumed content explicitly depicting strangulation during intimate activities. Furthermore, the website required subscription, indicating that Russo actively sought out this material and was willing to pay for it. 2 days prior to Diane's death, Russo had accessed a particular story on the website that told the tale of a man who, under the guise of being a buyer, infiltrated a lonely woman's home, strangled her, and then stole valuables to make the crime appear as a robbery, thus disguising his true motive of satiating his desire for strangulation. Detectives delved into Russo's financial life and found he and his wife had a mere $2,000 in savings and were still making mortgage payments on their current home, clearly indicating he was in no position to buy a new house. Without concrete evidence, police arrested Russo and charged him with the murder of Diane Hollick nearly 2.5 years after her death, which took place on November 15, 2001. In court, 14 women testifying under oath that Russo had approached them about viewing homes, often visiting them in person on the day of the murder. Notably, these women all matched a specific profile, suggesting Russo had been observing them beforehand. While most refused him entry, one woman allowed him in initially but soon asked him to leave due to his strange demeanor. Russo's interest in homes was not random, as he specifically sought out homes occupied by women of a particular age group. The prosecution presented evidence that Russo visited homes for sale, often targeting women who lived alone. Russo visited Diane's house again, likely at her invitation, but this time with a specific intention. He had planned his actions carefully to avoid leaving any evidence. On a rainy day, Diane offered him a towel to dry off, which he casually discarded on the back of the sofa. As she showed him around the house, Russo attacked her on the second floor. Prosecutors believed that Russo derived pleasure from the act of strangulation, which ultimately led to Diane's death. Before leaving the scene, Russo took cable ties and Diane's wedding ring, which were never found by the police. He used a spare key hidden at the front door to lock up behind him. This was the prosecution's version of events. At the trial, Russo's current and former wives testified that he had a history of enjoying the act of strangulation. It's worth noting that Russo had a prior conviction for a similar crime. After deliberating for 11 hours, the jury found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, but never admitted to his guilt, despite his history of similar crimes. Russo will become eligible for parole again and can submit his initial petition in 2044. At that point, he will be approximately 80 years old. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Pappenheim. Sarah Pappenheim was born on January 30, 1997, in Minnesota. She was the second child of Donnie Odegaard and Jerry Pappenheim, with an older brother named Josh. The siblings developed a strong bond as they grew older. When Sarah was in second grade, her family relocated from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where she was an active member of the school band and played the drums. Sarah was passionate about music, especially drumming. She was a skilled drummer and regularly played at jam sessions in Redding. As one of the few female drummers, she stood out on stage. When Sarah was 18, she moved back to her hometown in Minnesota with her mother and brother after her parents got divorced. There, she continued to play drums at different venues and eventually met Bernard Allison, a famous blues guitarist and singer. Allison was impressed with her skills and invited her to join him on stage occasionally. By the time Sarah turned 19, she had become a local celebrity among blues fans, known for her bright smile, which earned her the nickname Ronald McDonald. Meanwhile, her brother Josh was struggling with depression and mental health issues after their parents' divorce. Tragically, on an ordinary day in February 2016, the police arrived at their doorstep and delivered devastating news to Sarah's mother. Josh took his own life at the age of 20, leaving his loved ones, especially his mother Sarah, heartbroken. The bond between Sarah and Josh was incredibly strong, and his passing devastated her. To cope with her loss and to help others who struggle with mental health, Sarah decided to study psychology. She had been in touch with Nico Carson Major, who lived in the Netherlands, and she moved there to pursue her studies. At Erasmus University in Rotterdam, Sarah began her psychology program with Nico's support, who not only helped her navigate her grief but also assisted her with her studies as a native speaker. Sarah's passion for music never faded despite her focus on studies and work. She stayed in touch with Bernard Allison, a musician she had performed with, and shared her dream of buying a drum kit. In January 2017, Bernard's band toured Europe, and on Sarah's 20th birthday, January 30th, she attended Bernard's concert in Germany with Nico. Bernard spotted her in the audience, invited her on stage, and let her play the drums with them, just like old times. Sarah lived on the third floor of an apartment complex near the university in Rotterdam. As 2018 drew to a close, she planned to spend Christmas in the United States and booked a flight for a week before New Year's Eve. However, on December 12th, her life took a devastating turn. When a police officer appeared at her doorstep, just like in 2016 when her son had passed away, Sarah's legs began to shake. She instinctively knew what the officer was about to tell her, but couldn't bear the thought of losing another loved one. When the officer informed Sarah's mother that her daughter had passed away, she was overcome with grief and lost consciousness. This devastating news came just a year after the loss of her son, who had died at the age of 20. Sarah was only 21 years old. Sarah lived in a student complex on the third floor, where she rented an apartment with her roommate, Joel Schelling. Joel was also a musician, and music was the common interest that brought them together. Unlike Sarah, who was outgoing and always smiling, Joel was more reserved and had a temper. Despite their occasional quarrels, Sarah remained a supportive friend to Joel, often calming him down when he became angry. However, the situation took a turn for the worse over time. Just 6 days before her death, Sarah confided in her friend Adam Pryor that she was afraid of Joel, who had threatened to harm 3 people he disliked. Sarah knew she had to go to the police. Just a couple of days before her death, she had spoken to her mother on the phone about her concerns. Sarah's roommate, Joel, was behaving in a way that was increasingly bothering her. Her mother advised her to find a new place to live as soon as possible and to avoid Joel until she could move out. On December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., the police received a call from Sarah and Joel's next-door neighbors, who reported hearing a loud fight and then Sarah screaming. When the police arrived, they found Sarah lying on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Despite attempts to revive her, Sarah died from her injuries. The police immediately began searching for Joel, who was nowhere to be found. Neighbors reported that he had left the apartment in a hurry, taking a large double bass with him. This distinctive instrument became a key detail in the police's description of Joel. Less than 2 hours after the crime, 23-year-old Joel Schelling was arrested at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. He was on his way to visit his parents, who lived in Eindhoven. After Joel was arrested, he made a shocking confession to his mother while on the train. He told her that he had taken Sarah's life. The judge subsequently placed Joel under arrest for 14 days to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducting the autopsy on Sarah's body found 27 stab wounds, with several of them on her neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after Sarah passed away, her mother, Dani Odegaard, traveled to the Netherlands to arrange for her daughter's body to be returned home. However, this required raising $40,000, a task that was made possible by the generosity of strangers who cared for the family. Upon learning of Joel's arrest, Dani Odegaard inquired if her daughter had contacted the police. Sarah had instead reached out to social workers, who visited Joel and found him calm. However, the next day, Sarah again contacted social services due to Joel's erratic behavior, including hitting himself with a hammer and threatening to harm multiple people. The case against Schelling began in March 2019. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Pappenheim's death and admitted his guilt. However, he claimed he did not remember the actual act of taking her life. According to Schelling, he recalled fighting with Sarah, but his next memory was of being in the shower, cleaning himself. Sarah's mother, Dani Odegaard, attended each hearing, relying on an interpreter to understand the proceedings. During the trial, Schelling stated that he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. However, when asked if these voices had instructed him to fight with Sarah, Schelling said he did not know and could not recall. He also could not remember the cause of their fight. Prior to the verdict, experts testified that Schelling suffered from multiple disorders and required long-term treatment. Despite this, they concluded that Schelling was responsible for Sarah's death. The verdict was announced in December 2019. Sarah Pappenheim's death occurred before she could receive a response to her second request for support, after her initial request for assistance from social workers went unresponded due to the specialist's unavailability. The medics concluded that Schelling was aware of the initial fight and scuffle with Sarah and had the opportunity to either stop the altercation or grab the knife. By choosing the latter, he should be held accountable for his actions. The prosecutor requested a 10-year prison sentence, but the judge in Rotterdam gave Schelling a 6-year prison term, followed by an indefinite sentence in a psychiatric hospital. The court reduced the sentence from 10 years due to Schelling's relatively young age and his significantly diminished mental capacity at the time of the crime. This means that the court did not consider Schelling fully responsible for his actions. When handing down the sentence, the court released a detailed explanation stating that, although the crime was severe and unpredictable, Schelling's serious psychological disorders made it likely that he would commit another violent crime. The court noted that Schelling suffers from chronic psychological disorders that require ongoing treatment in a clinical setting. The court viewed psychiatric detention as a punitive measure for Schelling, who has expressed a willingness to undergo treatment for depression and other disorders. The court has ruled that Schelling will remain in treatment until it determines he is well enough to be released. The court will review his status every 2 years. Additionally, Schelling has been ordered to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Dani Odegaard is outraged by the sentence, believing it is too lenient. She thinks Schelling should have received a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. In her opinion, Schelling would have faced a much harsher sentence in the US, such as life imprisonment or the death penalty, which would have prevented him from committing a similar crime in the future. She is also concerned that Schelling may be eligible for parole in as little as 4 years and vowed to do everything in her power to keep him behind bars. An investigation was also conducted into the social workers who had interacted with Sarah. The investigation concluded that the social workers could not be held accountable for failing to identify Schelling's disorders because they did not possess the necessary expertise to make such a diagnosis. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Daniel Wozniak. Sam Herr was born to parents Stephen and Raquel Kalberman on May 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California. As their only child, Sam Herr was showered with love and attention from his parents, his father being a special education teacher and his mother a stay-at-home parent. Sam Herr maintained a close relationship with his parents even after he moved away. Despite his physically imposing stature, Sam Herr's friends affectionately referred to him as a gentle giant, describing him as a fun-loving and laid-back individual. Sam Herr enlisted in the United States Army at a young age and completed tours of duty in Afghanistan and Germany as part of the 173rd Airborne. After serving for 3 years, he was honorably discharged and returned to Southern California to pursue higher education using the GI Bill. His goal was to complete college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. To achieve this, Sam enrolled in Orange Coast Community College, where he befriended Julie Kibushi, who was 3 years his junior. However, Sam Herr struggled with the emotional aftermath of his military service, ultimately developing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a common affliction among veterans. When 28-year-old Sam Herr failed to visit his parents' house over a weekend as planned, they began to worry. Sam Herr's parents, Stephen and Raquel, became increasingly concerned after several attempts to contact their son went unanswered. Deciding to take matters into their own hands, Stephen went to Sam Herr's apartment in Costa Mesa with his wife to see what was amiss. Their discovery led to immediate panic when they could not find their son and only saw Julie Kibushi in a state of horror. Stephen quickly dialed 911 as Raquel choked and screamed. The moment they realized Julie had met a gruesome end, they knew their lives would never be the same, and the trauma would have a lasting impact. The Costa Mesa community was shocked by the incident, as murders are rare there. At the apartment, police found no signs of a disturbance. The bedroom, however, presented a disturbing scene. On the bedside table, investigators found an unused knife, as well as 2 books, a combat manual and a sex guide. But it was the condition of the bed that was truly horrifying. The bed was soaked in the Julie Kibushi's blood, and the deceased Julie Kibushi was found in a compromising position, partially lying on the bed and partially kneeling on the floor. Her pants had been pulled down, exposing her lower body, leading detectives to suspect that she may have been sexually assaulted before her murder. The autopsy revealed that she had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, with 1 bullet entering the top center of her skull. Although a knife was found on the bedside table, it appeared to have been unused. Other unusual details included a tiara on the victim's head and the words, "All yours," scrawled on the back of Julie Kibushi sweater. Julie Kibushi handbag was found in the kitchen. The detectives identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibushi, who was born on Valentine's Day in 1987 to a Japanese-American family. She was the first daughter and third of 4 children to parents June and Masa Kibushi. Her parents affectionately called her "my Valentine girl" from a young age. Julie Kibushi developed a passion for tap dancing at the age of 5, which continued to grow throughout her life. Those who knew her described her as a joyful person to be around, with a goofy and bubbly personality that could light up a room. Julie Kibushi was known for her kindness and willingness to go out of her way to help others. Julie Kibushi's life was a balance between her Japanese heritage and her independent American spirit. She had recently graduated from the Orange County School of the Arts and was pursuing a degree in fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. There, she befriended 26-year-old Sam Herr and even tutored him in anthropology. Little did she know, her kindness would ultimately lead to her tragic demise. The police investigation into Julie Kibushi's murder was underway. Detectives meticulously examined the crime scene, searching for clues that would reveal the truth about her final moments. Their attention turned to Sam Herr, as Julie Kibushi's body was found in his apartment. His sudden disappearance further raised suspicions. With evidence pointing to Sam Herr's involvement, investigators decided to take a closer look at him. Detectives suspected that Sam Herr had committed the crime in a moment of passion and then fled. This theory was supported by the fact that Sam Herr was nowhere to be found after the murder of Julie Kibushi in his apartment. The discovery of text messages from Sam Herr's number on Julie Kibushi's phone further fueled their suspicions. Initially, the messages seemed innocuous, with Sam Herr sending Julie Kibushi a text at 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, telling her he would help a friend and then visit his parents. However, just 2 hours later, his messages took a drastic turn, as he frantically asked Julie Kibushi to come to his apartment. However, investigators interpreted these messages as evidence of Sam Herr's guilt, arguing that he had planned for Julie Kibushi to visit his apartment, which ultimately led to the murder. The disappearance of several key items from the apartment hinted at Sam Herr's possible flight. His passport and car were both missing, leading investigators to a straightforward conclusion: Sam Herr was on the run, and likely the prime suspect in the crime. As the investigation continued, the Costa Mesa police tracked Sam Herr's cell phone and credit card activity to pinpoint his location. They discovered that his credit card had been used for 4 ATM withdrawals and a purchase at a pizza delivery place in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles from Sam's home. Police anticipated that Sam Herr would appear in the surveillance footage of the ATM. However, when the bank provided the footage, the police were shocked to see a teenager wearing a hoodie, not Sam Herr, withdrawing money from his account. Neither the police nor Sam Herr's parents could identify the mysterious boy. Investigators believed he was probably helping Sam Herr escape or hide. In either case, the Costa Mesa police were determined to find him. On May 26, 2010, they discovered that his credit card had been used for another pizza delivery, and they began tracing the delivery driver. Police went to an address provided by a tipster, expecting to catch Sam Herr, but instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freilich and his friends. Although initially suspected, authorities quickly cleared Wesley's name. However, they discovered that he possessed Sam Herr's credit card. Wesley told investigators a surprising story. He had been given the credit card by Daniel Wozniak, a local theater actor who had met Wesley through community theater. Daniel Wozniak claimed to be a bail bondsman and said he needed help collecting money from Sam Herr. Believing Wozniak's story, Wesley agreed to withdraw cash using the credit card, unaware of the true circumstances. A total of $1,900 was withdrawn from the account, sparking further investigation. The name Daniel Wozniak was familiar to investigators, who had previously found an invitation to his upcoming wedding in Sam Herr's apartment. This raised several questions: who was Daniel Wozniak, and what was his connection to Sam Herr? Was he involved in helping Sam Herr escape, or was he a more sinister accomplice to the murder? These questions needed to be answered. To understand Daniel Wozniak's potential role, investigators looked into his background. Born on March 23, 1984, Daniel Wozniak was the youngest of 3 brothers. Due to his parents' demanding work schedules, he spent a significant amount of time with his grandparents after school. Daniel Wozniak grew up in a privileged household and was accustomed to luxury. Daniel Wozniak's journey to becoming an actor began in his early 20s. Despite struggling to hold down a job and often having to move to low-paying positions, his passion for acting and singing in musicals kept him going. It was during this time that he met his future wife, a fellow actress, and they eventually got married. However, their happiness was short-lived. On May 26, 2010, the day of Daniel Wozniak's bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California, police arrived with an arrest warrant. This unexpected turn of events linked Daniel Wozniak to the murder of Julie Kibushi, as it turned out that Sam Herr, the suspected killer, lived in the same apartment complex as Daniel Wozniak. Authorities believed that Daniel Wozniak may have helped Sam Herr escape or hide, leading them to assume he was involved in the crime. Police arrested and questioned Daniel Wozniak. Initially, during interrogation, Daniel Wozniak claimed that his only wrongdoing was credit card fraud and that he had covered for his friend Sam Herr. He explained to investigators that he, Sam Herr, and Wesley had planned to withdraw all of his money from the bank and then report the credit cards as stolen. Daniel Wozniak claims he dropped Sam Herr off at a local mall. Detectives remained skeptical, however, believing that Daniel Wozniak was still protecting Sam Herr and had more to do with Julie Kibushi's murder than he had let on. In an effort to uncover the truth, police asked Wozniak to provide a DNA sample, a request that made him nervous. Detectives noticed Daniel Wozniak's nervous behavior when questioned about his DNA being found at Sam Herr's apartment, despite his attempts to act nonchalant. As the pressure mounted, he began to alter his story repeatedly. Eventually, Daniel Wozniak cracked and admitted he knew about Julie Kibushi's murder and had helped the perpetrator escape. However, when reminded that his DNA had been collected, he insisted it would not match any evidence found on Julie Kibushi's body, clinging to the claim of his innocence. Just as detectives were expecting Daniel Wozniak to reveal more information, he abruptly ended the interview. The detectives, determined to uncover the truth, informed Daniel Wozniak that he would be arrested as an accessory to murder if he didn't provide a full account of his involvement. Daniel Wozniak, who was scheduled to get married in just 48 hours, was caught between revealing the truth and avoiding arrest, which would ruin his wedding plans. Under intense questioning, Daniel Wozniak's story began to unravel. Detectives sensed his weakness and accelerated the process by falsely claiming that DNA evidence linked him to Julie Kibushi's body. They misled him, as DNA test results would not be available for weeks. Instead of disputing the claim, Daniel Wozniak surprisingly explained that his DNA would be on Julie Kibushi's body because he was near her. This inconsistent response raised suspicions. As Daniel Wozniak's lies continued to crumble, he made a stunning revelation, which was particularly alarming to detectives because they had initially observed only one gunshot wound at the crime scene. It wasn't until the autopsy was performed that a second gunshot wound was discovered, casting further doubt on Daniel Wozniak's credibility. Daniel Wozniak's confession implicated him as an accomplice to the murder, allowing investigators to formally detain him. However, detectives still needed to locate Sam Herr, and Daniel Wozniak refused to cooperate. Despite being in custody, Daniel Wozniak made a phone call to his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. Unbeknownst to Daniel Wozniak, the conversation was being recorded, which would eventually ensnare him in his own deceit. Rachel decided to prioritize her freedom over her relationship and informed Daniel Wozniak that she would share more information with the detectives. Realizing he needed to act swiftly, Daniel Wozniak became frantic and sought to negotiate a deal with the detectives, a reversal of his stance just hours earlier. Daniel Wozniak revealed a shocking account to the detectives, detailing his sinister murder plan. It began with a seemingly innocuous request to a friend, Sam Herr, whom he considered trustworthy. On May 21, 2010, Daniel Wozniak asked Sam Herr to help him move boxes at the Los Alamitos Theater attic, located on a local military base. Sam Herr was initially unaware of what had happened. When he realized he had been shot, he begged Daniel Wozniak for help. However, Daniel Wozniak showed no mercy. Without hesitation, he reloaded the gun and shot Sam Herr a second time, killing him instantly. The suspect brutally murdered Sam Herr and didn't stop there. He then used Sam Herr's phone to text Julie Kibushi, luring her to Sam Herr's apartment. He left Sam Herr's body in the attic later that night. The suspect snuck into Sam Herr's apartment, where Julie Kibushi had fallen into his trap. He then shot Julie Kibushi twice in the head. Daniel Wozniak altered the crime scene to make people think Sam Herr was the culprit, and he fled after attacking and killing Julie Kibushi. However, Daniel Wozniak realized that he still had to hide Sam Herr's body. Daniel Wozniak went back to the attic and cut off Sam Herr's hands and head to make it harder to identify the body. He then got rid of these body parts in a nearby park. Despite his gruesome actions, Daniel Wozniak appeared to be unaffected and returned to the theater, where he was seen laughing and joking with others in several photos taken at cast parties, which were later found by detectives. The underlying motive for the murders was surprisingly straightforward: money. Daniel Wozniak's financial struggles were well documented, with 2 months of unpaid rent threatening his eviction and no means to fund the lavish wedding and honeymoon he had planned. However, his situation changed dramatically when he discovered that Sam had $62,000 in savings from his military service. This revelation sparked a sinister plan, and Daniel Wozniak brutally murdered 2 innocent people in cold blood, all to fund his own extravagant celebrations. The bag containing crucial evidence against Daniel Wozniak was meant to be disposed of by his brother Tim, but Tim threw it over their parents' fence instead. The bag held incriminating items like bloody clothing, a weapon, and victim Sam's records and passport, all with Daniel's DNA. This treasure trove of evidence helped secure a quick conviction, with Daniel found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder on December 16, 2015. On January 11, 2016, the jury in Daniel Wozniak's trial recommended the death penalty after only 1 hour of deliberation, a remarkably short time for such a serious decision. The judge later sentenced Daniel Wozniak to death on September 23, 2016. Years after the trial, detectives discovered that Rachel Buffett, Daniel Wozniak's former fiancée, had been aware of the murder plots and had misled investigators. Despite her denials, Rachel Buffett was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of accessory after the fact for allegedly lying to the police on multiple occasions. On September 12, 2018, Rachel Buffett was found guilty of 2 serious charges, which carried a maximum sentence of 44 months in prison. As a result, she received a 32-month prison